By 4:10 on the afternoon of Ray Mercer's funeral, Grant had divided their father's life into two piles. The orchard, packing barn, house, tractors, cold room, roadside stand, and Mercer name were in the thick pile in front of Grant and Wade. In front of Eli sat a 6-page water contract, a brass key with green corrosion around its teeth, and a photograph of a concrete pump house half swallowed by blackberry vines. "You always liked working down there," Wade said. Eli looked at him. "I liked working down there? Well, you didn't complain as much." Grant pressed 2 fingers to the contract, as if keeping the pages from escaping. "The orchard can't survive being split 3 ways. Dad knew that. The will gives us latitude if we agree on a practical division. So, you two get the orchard, and you get the river parcel," Grant said. 6 acres, free and clear, 6 acres of rock. "Riverfront rock," Wade added. "Put a tiny house on it. Get one of those wood-fired tubs. People pay stupid money to sit outside in hot water now." Their father's coffee cup was still in the sink behind them. Ray had written ELI, valves, on the kitchen calendar for the week after his death, then underlined it twice. Eli touched the corroded key. Whose idea was this? Neither brother answered quickly enough. Rain tapped the windows with the soft, steady patience of western Washington. Beyond the glass, rows of peach and pear trees ran down the slope in black, wet lines. White petals clung to the grass. The funeral guests had admired the bloom on their way in, as though Ray had arranged it. Grant pushed back from the table and began stacking paper plates. He was still wearing the white shirt from the service, sleeves rolled with exact, matching folds. At 38, he had Ray's high forehead, and their mother's habit of cleaning when he wanted a conversation to end. "No one is trying to cheat you," he said. Wade leaned against the counter with his tie loosened to the 3rd button. "That sentence always helps." Grant gave him a look. "I'm just saying, when somebody says nobody's cheating anybody, you do start checking for your wallet." Eli almost laughed. Wade could still do that, press a thumb into a bruise and somehow make it tickle. Then Wade glanced at the orchard paperwork, at the equipment list and business accounts, and the feeling passed. Eli had come home with 2 duffel bags in his truck and $86 available on a credit card. Grant knew because Grant had paid for the motel after Eli's truck stalled outside Yakima. Grant had called it a funeral expense. "What's the contract actually worth?" Eli asked. $600 a month during delivery season," Grant said. "Assuming all 11 customers pay. Out of that, you maintain the intake, channel, meters, and main line. Power for the lower pump comes out of your pocket. Dad said the gravity line handled most of it. Dad said a lot of things 5 years ago." Wade folded his arms. A dark crescent of orchard dirt remained under one thumbnail despite the service, despite the handshakes and roast beef sandwiches, and people telling him Ray was in a better place. "The lower gate's warped. Channel needs dredging. Remote meters are junk. We priced the obvious work last fall. It was ugly." "You priced it?" Dad asked me to. Ray had not asked Eli. 6 years earlier, Eli would have been the one sent into the channel with hip boots and a shovel, while Wade stood above him, naming tools incorrectly. But 6 years earlier, Eli had also been 19, furious at everyone, and convinced leaving town was the same thing as winning. Grant brought a black trash bag from under the sink. He swept wilted napkins and plastic forks into it. "The contract renews automatically as long as delivery standards are met," he said. "But it isn't an asset in the way you're thinking. You can't flip it. You can't sell the water. You're basically the cooperative's underpaid maintenance man." "Sounds right," Eli said. "Dad did always see my potential." Wade looked toward the window. That landed harder than Eli intended. Their father had been dead 4 days. Ray's work boots still waited by the mudroom door. Toes pointed toward the orchard, and every mean thing felt both overdue and indecent. Grant tied the trash bag too tightly. One plastic handle stretched white. "The will leaves all 3 of us equal shares," he said. "If we insist on literal thirds, we either cut up the property or sell it. You know what that does to the business." Eli did know. The orchard occupied 112 acres on a long bench above the Yakima River, a green pocket on the dry side of the Cascades where every living row depended on water being told where to go. A third of the acreage without access to the barn or packing line would be difficult to operate. A forced sale would scatter the land among vineyard owners, developers, or hobby farmers with clean boots. Grant had spent 12 years building supermarket accounts. Wade had spent 15 seasons keeping crews and machines moving. They had stayed through frost years, smoke years, and the year their mother's treatments turned the kitchen into a pharmacy. Eli had left 2 months after her funeral. That history sat at the table, too. It did not make the piles equal, but it kept him from simply flipping the table. "Why don't I get a share of the company?" Eli asked. Grant stopped moving. Wade said, "You don't work here. I worked here from the time I could carry a shovel. We all did. I'm here now." "For 4 days," Grant said quietly. The rain thickened. Somewhere in the mudroom, the old refrigerator made a clunk that sounded like someone bumping the wall. Eli remembered Ray slapping that refrigerator every time it did that. As if the machine needed reminding who owned it, Grant sat again. His voice softened, which made Eli more wary. "The orchard is carrying debt. It needs operating cash next month. Payroll, fuel, sprays, packaging. A third of the company isn't a third of some big number sitting in a bank. It's a third of the obligations. Can you cover them?" There it was, not cruelty exactly. Arithmetic. Eli rubbed a thumb over a coffee ring on the table. His landscaping job in Bend had disappeared when the owner lost 2 commercial contracts. His apartment lease had ended the same week. He had told Ray none of that during their last phone call. Ray had asked whether he was keeping busy, and Eli had said, "Always." Now his brothers knew the answer. Wade pulled out the chair across from him and sat backward in it. "Take a week. Go look at the river place. Maybe Grant's wrong and it's paradise." Grant's jaw tightened. "What?" Wade said. "You're wrong recreationally. Keeps you humble. I never said he had to decide today. You put signature flags on the papers. They're removable." Eli stared at the little yellow arrows Grant had attached beside 3 blank lines. "Sign here," each one said, cheerfully assisting him toward dispossession. "Did Dad choose this split?" Eli asked. Grant looked down at his hands. Wade turned the chair a few degrees, then back. "The will didn't assign specific property," Grant said. "That wasn't my question." "No," Wade said at last. "Dad didn't choose it." Grant exhaled through his nose. Wade continued. "He kept saying we'd sit down together. Then, every time we tried, he'd get pissed off and go check something. A pump, a delivery, the weather, pick one. So this is you two. It's the only division that keeps the orchard intact," Grant said, "and keeps it with you." "Yes." The clean answer surprised Eli. Grant could be slippery when he thought diplomacy was required, but he had never been a good liar. At the service that morning, he had stood at the lectern and read a brief account of Ray's life, dates, acreage, awards from the cooperative, without once saying what he loved about him. Eli had resented him for that, until he saw Grant gripping the lectern so hard his knuckles blanched. Wade stood and went to the sink. He picked up Ray's coffee cup, stared into the dried brown crescent at the bottom, then set it down again without washing it. "Take the week," he said. Eli gathered the contract and key. "Where's the photograph from?" "Co-op inspection packet," Grant said. "February." So Dad knew it was falling apart. "Dad knew," Grant said. Outside, the funeral canopy sagged in the rain. Folding chairs stood in uneven rows on the lawn, their seats collecting water. Someone had left a foil-covered casserole on the porch rail with no name attached. Eli carried it to his truck because taking care of an abandoned casserole was easier than deciding which brother he hated. His pickup started on the second try. The windshield wipers dragged pollen into yellow smears. He should have driven back to the motel. Instead, he followed the service road past the packing barn. The big sliding doors were open, and Wade's foreman, Luis Ortega, was moving stacks of empty harvest bins out of the weather. Luis raised one gloved hand. Eli raised his in return, but did not stop. Mercer Orchard looked larger from behind the wheel than it had when he was growing up. It had acquired new blocks, new fencing, a silver roof over the cold room. The trees were pruned into disciplined shapes, every branch trained toward light. Ray believed a tree became confused if you let it want too many things. At the south block, Eli slowed. Water stood in a shallow depression between 2 rows, not rainwater. The ground around it had the oily shine of a steady underground leak, and the nearest peach trees were flowering unevenly. Eli parked, stepped into the mud in his funeral shoes, and crouched. A buried lateral line pulsed beneath his palm. He found the shutoff box under a mat of wet grass. The metal lid resisted until he worked the corroded key under one edge and pried it open. Wrong key, right talent. Inside, the valve stem was orange with rust. A tractor came down the row behind him. Wade stopped beside the leak and killed the engine. "You planning to ruin those shoes completely?" he called. "South lateral's leaking." "I know." "For how long?" "A while." Eli stood. Mud had soaked through one knee of his only decent pants. "You're losing pressure all the way to the lower rows. We'll fix it after bloom." "You'll lose more than pressure if the soil stays saturated." Wade's face closed by small degrees. "You've been back 4 days, and water still runs downhill." For an instant, Wade looked exactly like Ray when challenged. Chin tucked, eyes narrowed, body gone still before the voice rose. But Wade only restarted the tractor. "River parcels downhill," he said over the engine. "You ought to be a genius there." He drove on. Eli remained beside the open valve box until rain collected on the back of his neck. Then he returned to the truck and followed the road beyond the last pear block, down through scrub oak and basalt outcrops. The orchard disappeared behind him. The road narrowed to 2 muddy tracks and ended at a chain-link gate bent inward at the center. The corroded key opened the padlock. Below the gate, blackberry vines smothered the slope. Through them, he could just make out the pump house from the photograph, its concrete walls dark with moisture. Beyond it ran a narrow channel choked with reeds, and beyond that, the Yakima River moved brown and cold under the rain. Eli unfolded the contract on the hood of his truck. 11 delivery names were listed in a faded attachment. The first was Alvarez Pear Farm. Beside it, in Ray's blocky handwriting, were 3 words: "Low block first, promised." Eli read them twice. Then, from somewhere inside the brambles, he heard water moving through a pipe that was supposed to be shut down. The sound came in uneven bursts, a hollow rush, followed by a metallic knock. Eli left the contract beneath the windshield wiper and pushed into the blackberries. Thorns snagged his funeral jacket. The ground dropped faster than it appeared from the road. Slick basalt ledges hidden under dead leaves, and he had to catch himself against the vines twice before reaching the channel. The concrete pump house had 1 steel door and no visible windows. Moss filled the letters somebody had scratched into the wall decades ago. RM had been added later, deep and impatient, beside a smaller MA. Eli tried the brass key. It entered the lock but refused to turn. Of course. He leaned his shoulder into the door, worked the key gently, then less gently. Something shifted inside. The door opened 4 inches and stopped against a drift of silt and leaves. The smell came first. River mud, wet iron, mouse droppings, and the burn dust odor of old electrical equipment. He squeezed through sideways and found a breaker panel, 2 blue pump housings, a workbench, and enough rusted pipe fittings to supply a museum of unsuccessful repairs. The noise traveled through the western wall. Eli turned on his phone flashlight. A galvanized pipe as wide as his forearm emerged from the floor, climbed the wall, and joined a green-painted manifold beneath a round pressure gauge. The gauge needle trembled near 0. Every few seconds, water slid backward through the check valve and struck the fitting with a dull clang. Not running water, draining water. He traced the line until his light found a dark stain around a flange. A bead swelled there, dropped, and vanished into the muddy floor. Ray would have called it a weep. Anything short of water knocking him off his feet had been a weep. Eli crouched beside the pump. A clipboard hung from a nail above it. The top page was a delivery log from the previous August, each property listed with dates, meter readings, and Ray's initials. The handwriting began sharp. By the last week, the numbers leaned downhill, and several entries had been corrected in Grant's narrow script. At the bottom, Ray had written, "Check Alvarez South Riser." Then beneath that, as though reminding himself, "Eli knows old route." Eli straightened too quickly and struck his head on the manifold. The curse echoed beautifully in the little room. He stood with one palm pressed to his scalp, staring at the note. It did not say call Eli. It did not say ask Eli to come home. His father had written his name the way he wrote measurements and valve sizes, as information useful to someone else. Outside, rain ticked against the metal roof. Eli took a picture of the log, then another of the leaking flange. He found the main isolation valve and tried it. The wheel did not move. He braced one foot against the pump base and pulled until pain flared across his shoulders. "Come on." The wheel gave a quarter turn with a squeal. The knocking slowed. He was soaked and muddy by the time he climbed back to the truck. The The casserole waited on the passenger seat, its foil roof dented where his elbow had struck it. He drove to the motel with the heater blasting and the 6-page contract spread safely across the back of the cab. The Bellwether Motor Lodge advertised river views, though Eli's room faced an ice machine and a dumpster enclosed by cedar fencing. He ate casserole at the narrow desk with a plastic fork. It contained chicken, rice, broccoli, and enough cheese to insulate a house. He read the contract twice. The language was older than the printer paper carrying it. The original agreement had been executed in 1949, then amended repeatedly as farms changed hands, and the irrigation cooperative imposed modern metering rules. Mercer Water Delivery, an assumed business name Eli had never heard anyone use aloud, was responsible for the Bellwether Lower Route from April 15th through September 30th. Priority during restrictions depended on continuous compliance. Service had to be offered in the listed sequence according to acreage, crop need, and approved schedules. The orchard appeared sixth. Eli pictured Grant discovering that. He wondered if Grant already had. He called him. Grant answered on the 4th ring. "Everything okay?" "Depends." "Did you know the orchard is number 6 on the delivery schedule?" A pause. "The schedule rotates." "That isn't what this says. Daily sequencing rotates. The allocation order doesn't." "You did know." "Yes. And you still want the contract off the orchard's books. It barely breaks even. It controls delivery to the orchard. It administers delivery. The cooperative controls the allocation." Eli put down his fork. "You practice that sentence. I've been dealing with this for a year, Eli. You arrived Sunday." There was no anger in Grant's voice, which made it worse. Grant sounded tired, maybe standing in the kitchen, with the trash bag still by the back door and Ray's cup still in the sink. "Why didn't Dad fold the root into the orchard company?" Eli asked. "He didn't want to." "Why?" "If you find out, let me know." The line went quiet. Eli picked at a grain of rice stuck to the contract's plastic cover. His notes say the Alvarez South Riser needed checking last August. I'm sure a lot of things needed checking. Did anybody do it? I don't know. You don't know, or it wasn't your department. Grant let out a breath. Take the week we offered. Look at everything. Then make a decision based on what exists now, not on whatever argument you wish you'd had with Dad. The accuracy of it left Eli briefly speechless. Grant said, more softly, "There's money for you either way. If you refuse the division and we sell, you get 1/3 after debts and taxes. If you take the river parcel, Wade and I can buy out the difference over time." "What difference?" "Appraisal isn't finished, but you've already made the piles. We're trying to. You put my signature flags on one." Another pause. "Good night, Eli." Grant ended the call. At 2 a.m, the ice machine emptied itself with a crash. Eli woke reaching for a valve wrench that was not there. He spent the rest of the night half asleep, dreaming in the physical grammar of the orchard: pressure, slope, obstruction, release. In one dream, Ray stood knee-deep in the channel, pointing at something beneath the water. Eli kept asking what he meant, but Ray would not speak over the pump noise. By 7, the rain had weakened to mist. Eli bought gas station coffee and a blueberry muffin, then drove back to the river parcel wearing work boots, old jeans, and his landscaping jacket. A faded green Subaru was parked at the gate. A woman stood beside it with a travel mug in each hand. She had silver hair pulled through the back of a canvas cap and wore rubber boots patched with black tape. Her face was narrow, brown from weather, and entirely unimpressed by him. "You're late," she said. "I didn't know we had plans." "Then you're right on time." She held out one mug. Eli took it cautiously. "May Alvarez," she said. "You're the one who left." "Eli Mercer." "I know. You got taller." "I was 19. Men occasionally keep growing after 19, mostly around the middle." The coffee was strong and sweet, with cinnamon in it. He realized he had left his gas station cup on the motel dresser. May unlocked the chain-link gate with a brass key cleaner than his. "You have a key. I have 8 keys. 3 don't open anything anymore, but I'm emotionally attached." She started down the slope. Eli followed, carrying the contract in a grocery bag beneath his jacket. At the pump house, May stopped beside the scratched initials. She touched the smaller MA with one finger. "You did that?" Eli asked. "Your father did the big ugly ones. I had better penmanship even with a nail. You and Dad were down here together? Everybody was down here together in those days. Your grandfather thought free labor built character. Ray thought it built resentment. They were both right. She squeezed through the steel door and surveyed the pumps. You slowed the backflow. The check valve isn't seating. The check valve hasn't seated since Clinton was president. Ray used to tap it with that red mallet. Eli found the mallet under the workbench. Its wooden handle had been repaired with electrical tape. May watched his face. He kept things too long. So I've heard. I wasn't talking about tools. She lifted the clipboard from its nail and paged through the delivery logs. Unlike Grant, she did not move carefully around his grief. She seemed willing to step directly on it and trust him to say if it hurt. When did you last get water to the South Riser? Eli asked. Properly? July. The log shows deliveries through September. The meter shows deliveries. The meter sits uphill of the break. What break? May handed him the clipboard and led him outside. They followed the channel for several hundred yards, ducking alder branches and stepping over two places where the bank had slumped inward. May knew where buried lines crossed by the shape of the ground. At a rusted marker post, she turned uphill onto a path barely wider than a deer trail. My place starts beyond that ridge, she said. Main line splits at the old cottonwood. North branch feeds the house block. South branch feeds 14 acres of pears. And the South Riser lost pressure. It lost everything. Why didn't Dad repair it? He tried. That answer stopped him. May looked back. Ray wasn't himself last summer. He'd come out with the wrong fittings. Forget which valve he'd closed. Once he drove away with his toolbox sitting in my lane, then accused me of hiding it. No one said anything about that. I told Grant. What did Grant do? Took over the logs when he could. Asked your father to see a doctor. Got cussed off his own porch. They reached the cottonwood. Its trunk leaned over a concrete distribution box with two iron lids. May hooked her fingers through one lid and lifted. Water stains marked the chamber, but the pipes were dry. Eli knelt. When Dad couldn't restore your south branch, what did you use? Trucked water until harvest. Cost me nearly $9,000. And you still brought coffee. I considered poison. Cinnamon was cheaper. He laughed despite himself. May crouched across from him. Her knees cracked loudly. The cooperative review is in August, she said. They know the lower route missed deliveries. If it fails again, they'll terminate the contract and reorganize service. Maybe they'll extend the pressurized main someday. Maybe they won't. We're small acreage down here. Small acreage is another way of saying nobody's first problem. Eli studied the fittings. The contract doesn't start delivery until April 15th. That's next week. I know what day it is. You looked like you might not. He ran his hand along the inside wall of the box. The south gate valve had seized half open. Beyond it, the line should have carried residual water from the winter flush, but the pipe was empty. Where do you think the break is? If I knew, I'd be standing beside it looking superior. You're doing fine from here. May smiled. They walked the south route. Ray's old map existed mostly in May's memory and Eli's body. He remembered intersections before he remembered names. A stand of bitter brush where the line turned. A basalt shelf where Ray had once made him dig twice because the trench was shallow. A white fence that had since fallen. Near May's lower block, the ground dipped. Pear trees stood beyond the property line in straight gray rows, their buds beginning to open. The grass beneath them was dull and flattened. Eli found the wet spot under a thicket of wild rose. He pushed branches aside and sank one boot ankle-deep in mud. There, he said. May stood behind him, silent. The main line had not burst. A threaded coupling had separated where the soil shifted downhill, leaving a gap barely an inch wide. Roots had grown around the pipe like clenched fingers. Repairing it meant digging out 6 feet, cutting the damaged section, resetting the line, and probably replacing the seized gate at the cottonwood. Not impossible. That was the dangerous part. May took a folded paper from her jacket. This is what I paid your father last year. It isn't charity, and it isn't enough to rebuild the system. But I'll pay the same rate if you can give me 7 days of steady delivery before bloom finishes. I haven't accepted the contract. I didn't ask if you had. My brothers think the whole route is scrap. Your brothers can identify fruit by the sticker Grant designed for it. Wade knows the orchard. Wade knows trees. Grant knows customers. Ray knew water. May nodded toward the exposed gap. What do you know? Eli looked across the lower block. 1 week of water would not save a business or settle an inheritance. It would not prove Grant wrong or turn Ray's note into an apology. It was one broken coupling in cold mud. He set the grocery bag containing the contract on a dry rock. "Do you still have Dad's shovel?" he asked. May reached into the weeds and pulled out a mud-caked shovel with Ray burned into the handle. "I told you," she said. He kept things too long. The shovel blade struck stone 3 inches down. May leaned on the fence post and watched Eli attack the ground from a different angle. "Your father used to swear that rock moved uphill at night," she said. "Dad thought anything that made his day harder had a personal motive. He included people in that. He was generous that way." The soil around the coupling was packed with river cobble and pear roots. Eli worked slowly to avoid splitting the old pipe. May disappeared after 20 minutes and returned on a small orange tractor with a dented loader bucket, 2 spades, and a coil of rope. "You could have mentioned the tractor. You hadn't earned the tractor." Together they exposed 6 feet of line. The separated coupling had slipped downhill, but the pipe itself was misshapen near the threads. Eli scraped mud from the lettering and found a manufacturing date from 1978. May read it over his shoulder. "Younger than me, better preserved. I brought you coffee. Don't make me regret it." They needed replacement pipe, 2 compression couplings, a gate valve, gravel bedding, and luck. Eli wrote the measurements on his forearm because neither of them had paper they were willing to ruin. The hardware store in Bellwether had once been a feed store and still smelled faintly of molasses. Eli carried the failed coupling to the plumbing aisle, where a man named Earl peered at it over his glasses. "Ray finally send you back?" Earl asked. "Ray died." Earl lowered the coupling. "Damn. I heard, but I forgot you were his. Sorry." Eli had received condolences in church, at the house, beside the casket, and from strangers who squeezed his shoulder as if testing a melon. Earl's apology was the first that sounded embarrassed by Death's bad manners. "He didn't send me," Eli said. "No, I guess not." Earl found 1 compression coupling in stock and another in a box labeled irrigation, Miske. The gate valve had to be ordered. Eli added gravel, sealant, gloves, a hacksaw, and a pipe wrench long enough to persuade old fittings. At the register, the total came to $387. "Mercer account?" Earl asked. Eli hesitated. The orchard account had paid for parts all his life. Ray would send any son into town with a list, and Earl would make a carbon copy that Grant eventually complained about. But the orchard account now belonged to the thick pile. "No," Eli said. "Mine." His debit card declined. Earl looked toward the plumbing aisle with such concentration that it was almost kind. Eli checked his balance on his phone. The motel had placed a security hold larger than expected. He put back the new pipe wrench, gloves, and sealant. The total dropped to $246. The card went through. "You'll need the sealant," Earl said. "I have some. You have old sealant. I have optimism. Nobody's ever sealed pipe with that." Earl placed the container in the bag and did not ring it up. Outside, Eli sat in the truck with both hands on the steering wheel. A red insufficient funds alert glowed on his phone. Beneath it was a text from Grant. "Appraiser can meet Friday. Don't miss it." Eli typed, "I'm repairing the Alvarez line." He watched the 3 dots appear, vanish, then appear again. "Why? Because it's broken. That isn't what I meant." Eli turned the phone face down. May had made sandwiches by the time he returned. She handed him one wrapped in wax paper while he unpacked the parts. "You bought the cheap gravel," she said. "It's gravel. It knows." She did not ask what he had paid or whether he could afford it. She gave him a jar of homemade pickles and held the pipe steady while he cut away the deformed end with Ray's old hacksaw. The repair took the rest of the day. They discovered the downhill section had shifted nearly 4 inches. Eli dug farther, relieved tension on the line, built a fresh gravel bed, and reset the pipe. The first compression coupling seated cleanly. The second leaked when they tested it with water from May's tractor tank. Eli took it apart. Mud had nicked the gasket. He cleaned it with his shirt, rotated it, and tried again. A thin jet struck him under the chin. May laughed so hard she had to sit on the tractor tire. "You want to do this?" he asked, wiping his face. "No, I want to enjoy you doing it." On the 4th attempt, the joint held. They walked back toward the cottonwood in the long gold light before sunset. Eli's hands ached. Mud had dried on his jeans from the knees down, and every thorn on the property seemed to have found his forearms. May carried the shovel over one shoulder. "Why M.A.?" he asked. She knew what he meant. Maria Alvarez. Before I married Tom Alvarez and became May Alvarez, which saved me the expense of new monograms. You and Dad? Don't sound so hopeful. Your father never had enough charm for an affair. That's reassuring. We were 16. We kissed once in the pump house. He opened his eyes halfway through and noticed the pressure gauge was dropping. Eli laughed. I'm serious. Stopped kissing me to check the pump. That sounds like him. I married Tom. Your father spent the next 38 years claiming he'd introduced us, which he had not. Where's Tom now? Arizona, alive, annoyingly happy, and married to a woman who enjoys golf. We divorced 12 years ago. I'm sorry, I'm not. Golf saved us from wasting another 12. At the distribution box, Eli fitted a temporary wrench to the C's south gate. It resisted. May braced the opposite side while he leaned into it. The valve moved with a deep grinding sound. Not all the way, he said. If the stem snaps, we're done until the replacement comes. Half will give me something. They returned to the pump house. Eli checked the breaker panel, opened the upstream valve, and primed the older pump using a bucket May lowered into the channel. The wiring insulation was cracked but intact. The pressure tank rang hollow where it should, and dull where it should. Every part gave him a reason not to start it. He pictured the $387 at the hardware store, the appraisal on Friday, the yellow sign here, flags. The orchard leak Wade would leave until after bloom. Then he threw the breaker. The pump growled. Dust shook from the rafters. The pressure needle climbed to 10 pounds, stuttered, then continued toward 25. A leak opened at the flange Eli had noticed the night before. Water ran down the wall. May reached for the breaker. Wait. Eli tightened the flange bolts in a crossing pattern. One turned, another did not. He drove the red mallet against the wrench until the bolt moved a fraction. The leak diminished to a heavy drip. Pressure held at 32. They drove uphill in May's Subaru because Eli's truck was nearly out of gas. At the Cottonwood, water hissed through the south gate. At the repaired coupling, dark mud trembled but did not bubble. They reached the lower block as evening settled between the rows. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then the old riser coughed black water onto Eli's boots. Air shrieked from the pipe. The flow cleared, brightened, and spilled into the narrow furrow between the first two rows of pear trees. May did not cheer. She stepped into the row and followed the water, using her boot to break small clods and guide the flow around roots. At the second tree, she bent and touched 2 fingers to the wet soil. 7 days, Eli said. If the pump lasts, and if that coupling holds. If it doesn't, you know where the shovel is. She straightened. Her eyes were wet, though the rest of her face remained practical. Eli looked away first. The water reached the 3rd tree. He had spent months laying decorative stone around corporate offices where nobody knew his name. He had built patios for people who changed the design after completion because the finished thing failed to cure whatever dissatisfaction had ordered it. None of it had felt like this narrow line of water soaking into neglected ground. His phone rang. Grant. Eli let it ring twice before answering. Where are you? Grant asked. Alvarez Place. Still? We restored the south line. Grant said nothing. Temporary gate repair, Eli continued. Main coupling was separated. Pump flange leaks. Check valves bad. The channel needs clearing before regular delivery. I know the list. No, you know a list. I'm standing in it. May moved farther down the row, directing water with the shovel. Grant said, the appraiser changed to 8 Friday morning. I'll be there. And we need your answer soon. Wade's meeting with the bank, Monday. For what? Operating line renewal. That's tied to the division? It's tied to knowing what property the company owns. Eli watched the water creep forward. Did Dad ever stop delivering to May? Another silence. Grant seemed to collect those when speaking about their father. He reduced service, Grant said. She got nothing after July. I don't have every meter record in front of me. You corrected the logs. I corrected arithmetic. Dad wrote numbers twice, skipped dates, transposed readings. I made the totals match the meters. The meter was above the broken line. I know that now. You knew he was forgetting things. Grant's voice sharpened. Yes, Eli, I knew. I was here. The words crossed the distance cleanly. Eli closed his eyes. Grant went on, quieter. I was here when he drove through the east fence. I was here when he left a burner on under an empty pot. I was here when he accused Wade of moving a valve that hadn't existed since 1996. We tried to get help. He refused. Then he'd have 3 good days and convince us we were overreacting. Why didn't you tell me? I called you in January. You asked if I was coming for pruning. I asked if you could come home. You said you were short-handed. What would you have done if I said Dad was scared and making mistakes? You hadn't answered his last 2 calls. Eli remembered both calls, one during a landscaping shift, one while he was drinking with coworkers after being laid off. Ray had not left messages. I would have come, he said. Grant did not challenge the lie. 8 on Friday. The call ended. May had reached the 4th tree. She did not look toward him, but he knew she had heard enough. Eli crouched at the riser and washed mud from his hands in the cold flow. His right knuckle was split. Water made the cut sting. He was sick, Eli said. He was proud, May answered. Sometimes that's an illness. Sometimes it just keeps one company. You should have called me. Ray told me not to. That usually work on you? No. May dug her shovel into the furrow. But I thought your brothers had. The pump stopped at dusk. Eli heard the absence before his phone buzzed with May's pressure alarm. They hurried back downhill and found the breaker tripped. The motor casing was hot enough to burn his palm. He waited 20 minutes, reset it, and watched the pump struggle back to pressure. It ran another hour. He slept in his truck beside the pump house, waking whenever the check valve knocked. At midnight, he tightened the leaking flange. At 2, he cleared reeds from the intake screen. At 4, he woke shivering, with Ray's jacket from the workbench pulled over his chest. Just before sunrise, headlights swept across the gate. Wade's tractor descended the muddy road with a tool chest strapped to the rear platform. He parked without greeting, removed a long red pipe wrench, and carried it toward the pump house. You put yours back at Earl's, Wade said. I couldn't afford it. I know. He called the orchard account about your parts. Eli sat up in the truck bed. I paid for them. Apparently Bellwether's economy survived. Wade set the wrench against the wall. Grant send you? No. Then why are you here? Wade looked at the pump house, the cleared intake, and the small amber light showing pressure on the line. Dad's socket set is under the workbench, he said. Back right corner. He hid the good tools because Luis kept organizing them. He turned toward the tractor. Wade. His brother stopped. Eli wanted to ask about Ray driving through the fence. The empty pot. The calls nobody had made clearly enough. Instead, he said, the orchard's south lateral is worse than it looks. Wade climbed onto the tractor. I know, he said, and drove back up the hill. Eli waited until the tractor noise disappeared before looking under the workbench. The socket set was exactly where Wade said, wrapped in an oily blue towel behind a carton of pressure gauges. Ray's initials had been stamped into the metal case. Inside, every socket sat in its assigned place except the 13/16, which lay loose beside 3 coins and a peppermint fused to its wrapper. Eli used it to remove the pump cover. The impeller was worn. The motor bearings complained when he turned the shaft by hand, and the capacitor looked swollen at one end. None of that explained the tripped breaker by itself. Together, it explained too much. At 8, May brought eggs folded into a flour tortilla. You live here now? She asked. I'm monitoring. You have pillow creases on your face. Advanced monitoring. She ate beside him on the pump house step, while he listed repairs on the back of a motel receipt. A new pump would cost more than he had. Rebuilding this one would still cost more than he had, only with added suspense. A white utility van appeared at the gate. The woman driving it honked once, then waited. That's Ruth Calder, May said. She believes gates should open out of respect. Ruth owned 7 acres of wine grapes and a low cinderblock tasting room, 2 properties beyond May's farm. She was in her late 40s, with cropped black hair, square red glasses, and coveralls bearing the ghost of a Pacific power patch. I heard the lower route has a pulse, she said, climbing out. May has 1 wet block, Eli said. I wouldn't call that a recovery. I would. My West meter twitched yesterday, most excitement it's seen since August. Ruth entered the pump house, looked at the open motor casing, and whistled. You run this overnight? In intervals. Which is mechanic language for yes. You're an electrician? Was. Then I decided grapes would be relaxing. May made a sound into her coffee. Ruth pointed at the breaker panel. This disconnect predates basic human caution. Your voltage drop is probably heating the motor. bad connection, undersized feeder, or spiteful ghost. I can pay you after the first service checks come in. I didn't ask for money. I need water to the west block by the 22nd. Regular delivery starts the 15th. And the west block is scheduled? Eli checked the contract attachment. Calder Vineyards appeared fourth, 2 positions before Mercer Orchard. Yes. Then I'll keep your pump from killing you. You keep my vines from becoming artisanal firewood. She retrieved a voltage meter and insulated gloves from the van. By noon, Ruth had found a corroded connection in the disconnect box and a section of feeder cable that warmed under load. She cleaned the contacts, replaced 2 lugs from supplies in her van, and wrote "Needs full rewire" in red marker across the panel. The pump ran 4 hours without tripping. Eli spent those hours walking the route. At each property he found a different version of neglect: a buried meter, a cracked riser, an owner who had stopped expecting Ray to arrive. Some greeted Eli with relief. Others wanted proof he held the contract before they paid anything. One man stood on his porch and asked whether Eli planned to disappear like he had before. "I didn't have the route then," Eli said. "You had the same last name." The answer followed him to the next gate. For the rest of the week, he learned the system one failure at a time. The Alvarez coupling held. The temporary south gate opened a little farther each day, though its stem shrieked in protest. Ruth's repairs kept the pump cool enough to run in 6-hour stretches. May's lower block drank faster than the furrows could carry water. And by the 5th day, the dry gray surface had darkened between every row. Eli slept at the motel twice and in his truck 3 times. He showered in room 18, washed mud from the tub with a hand towel, and ignored the motel manager's handwritten request that guests not launder work clothes in the sink. Grant texted him reminders about the appraisal. Wade sent nothing. At 7:45 Friday morning, Eli parked outside the house in jeans and the least wrinkled shirt from his duffel. Grant's sedan stood beside Wade's mud-spattered pickup. A silver SUV with Klein Rural Valuations on the door occupied Ray's usual spot. The appraiser was a cheerful woman named Denise Klein, who wore polished boots and spoke about soil classifications with genuine affection. She shook Eli's hand, apologized for his loss, and spent 2 hours photographing buildings, checking equipment serial numbers, and asking questions Grant answered before anyone else could. Wade grew irritated by the 3rd interruption. "She asked how old the North Wind machine is," Grant said, "and I was telling her. You said old enough to vote. It is." Denise measured the packing barn while the brothers stood outside under the eaves. Water dripped from a clogged gutter between Eli and Grant. "You look terrible," Grant said. "I've been sleeping." "Not successfully." Eli handed him a copy of the pump repair list. "This is what the route needs before full delivery." Grant scanned the page. "You added a 0. I wish. 14,000 if I replace the main pump. 9 if I rebuild and nothing else breaks." "Something else will break," Wade said. Grant folded the paper. "Which is why we separated it from the operating company. You separated it because you don't want to pay for it, correct?" The simplicity almost made Eli smile. Denise joined them carrying a tablet. "I'd like to see the river acreage." They took Wade's pickup because the SUV would not clear the ruts. Wade drove. Grant sat in front. Eli and Denise rode in back with 2 fence tools, a coil of drip hose, and an empty motor oil jug rolling across the floor at every turn. At the gate, May's Subaru and Ruth's van were already parked below. Wade noticed. "You charging admission?" "They're helping?" "With what?" "Keeping the pump alive." Wade looked at him in the mirror. "You don't own it yet." Water didn't wait for the paperwork. Denise inspected the acreage, photographed the pump house, and asked about flood history. At the channel, she opened a mapping application and frowned at the screen. "Access is through the orchard?" "Current road is," Grant said. "There's a recorded service easement. Steep parcel, limited buildable area. No septic evaluation." "Utilities?" "Power at the pump house," Eli said. "Not residential service." Denise glanced into the channel. "And the contract conveys with the parcel?" "The contract assigns to an approved operator," Grant said. "Eli has to accept the obligations and pass the cooperative's review, so not guaranteed income." "No," Eli said. Grant looked at him, perhaps expecting an argument. Denise typed something. "Do you have profit and loss statements for the route?" 3 years, Grant said. "Last year shows a loss." Because the pump repair was booked to the route? Eli asked. And because collections were down. Deliveries were down, which is what customers paid for. Denise raised one hand. I can note deferred maintenance and normalized operating costs, but I'm not assigning speculative value to a service agreement that can be terminated for non-performance. It has priority during rationing, if deliveries stay compliant, Eli said. That may have practical value. I'm talking about market value. Wade kicked a stone into the channel. Practical value's the kind that gets your shoes wet. The appraiser smiled politely and went back to her tablet. Eli watched the river through the cottonwoods. He understood then that no number Denise produced would answer the question at the kitchen table. The river parcel would appraise low because it was steep, rocky, and burdened. The contract would appraise lower because keeping it required a person willing to spend money before earning any. His brothers had not missed a hidden price. They had correctly recognized an expensive obligation and handed it to the brother least able to carry one. That knowledge should have sent him back up the road. Instead, he heard the pump start. Ruth had set it to deliver another 6-hour cycle to May's lower block. Pressure entered the line beneath their feet with a faint vibration. Wade felt it too. His head turned toward the sound. Denise finished her photographs. Back at the house, Grant spread the preliminary division documents across the kitchen table. Ray's coffee cup was gone from the sink. It stood clean and upside down on a dish towel. Eli nodded toward it. You finally washed it. Grant uncapped a pen. Wade did. Wade opened the refrigerator. It was growing an ecosystem. You could have put it in the dishwasher, Eli said. Dad said the logo would come off. The cup bore a faded picture of 3 pears and Mercer Orchard since 1948. Ray had protected a $3 mug for years and let a delivery system rot beneath him. Grant walked them through the agreement. Final values would be inserted after Denise's report. Grant and Wade would assume the orchard debt, retain the business, and pay Eli the appraised difference in annual installments. Eli would take the 6-acre parcel, pump house, root equipment, Mercer water delivery name, and responsibility for contract compliance beginning immediately. You should have a lawyer review this, Grant said. Did you? Yes. With orchard money? With my money. Same answer lately. Grant absorbed that without response. Eli flipped to the contract assignment. 3 yellow flags marked the signature lines. His name had been typed beneath one. If I don't sign, he said, you sell. If we can't agree on another division, and you've decided there isn't another division. Grant's face was gray with fatigue. I can't spend the next 5 years wondering when you'll need money and force a sale. The orchard needs decisions made by people who are here. I'm here. Now, Grant said. Wade shut the refrigerator harder than necessary. Grant. No. He gets to be angry, but he doesn't get to rewrite 6 years because he repaired 1 pipe. Eli placed both palms on the table. Wade stared at the floor. Grant stared at Eli. Behind them, the orchard moved in the window, rows bending slightly in the morning wind. Eli signed the division agreement. The pen caught on the cheap paper halfway through the M. He finished his name, signed the contract assignment, and pushed the pages toward Grant. No one looked relieved. Wade took the pen next. Grant signed last, adding the date in his tidy block numbers. Eli picked up the brass key. Delivery starts Wednesday, he said. Mercer Orchard is 6th. I'll send the schedule. Grant gathered the thick pile toward himself. Send the invoice too, he said. Eli looked for mockery and found none. Outside, Wade followed him to the truck. He carried Ray's clean coffee cup and set it on the hood between them. You should take this, Wade said. Why? You got the part of him that leaks. Eli laughed before he could stop himself. Wade did too, once, roughly. Then he handed Eli the cup, and the two of them stood in the orchard driveway, unable to decide whether the joke had been cruel. The coffee cup rode in the holder beside Eli's gear shift, rattling whenever the truck idled. At the motel, he packed his duffel bags, stripped the sheets, and carried the room key to the office. The manager looked over his shoulder toward the mud-streaked bathtub, visible through the open door. You plant something in there? She asked. Mostly myself. She kept $30 of his deposit for the towels. By noon, his belongings were stacked against the pump house wall beneath a blue tarp. The river parcel had no house, no bathroom, and no legal place to sleep. It did have a workbench long enough to lie on if he moved Ray's fittings, though one end stood directly beneath the leaking flange. May found him measuring it. I have a spare room, she said. I'm fine. There's a family of mice in that wall. I'll stay on the truck bed. They have relatives outside. I don't want charity. Neither do I. You can repair my north fence and stop eating motel casserole for breakfast. Eli looked at her. May lifted both hands. Your truck door doesn't close quietly. I heard the foil. Her spare room had yellow wallpaper, a narrow bed, and a dresser containing 3 empty drawers and one full of golf balls she had declined to send to Arizona. Eli moved in that afternoon under terms written on the back of an envelope: fence repair, gutter cleaning, and $20 a week toward utilities after the first service payments arrived. May taped the envelope to the refrigerator. Now you're a tenant, she said. Tenants get complaints instead of pity. Wednesday began at 4:30 with frost on the grass and mist lying low over the channel. Eli filled Ray's clean coffee cup, loaded the red pipe wrench, socket set, delivery logs, and a clipboard into the truck, then drove to the pump house in darkness. Ruth had left him a headlamp and a note on the breaker panel: do not confuse running with fixed. He primed the pump, cleared leaves from the intake, and threw the switch. Pressure rose to 30 pounds. At sunrise, he opened the first route gate. An older apricot grower named Leonard Shaw stood beside the meter in a quilted coat, watching the numbers move. Your father used to arrive late, Leonard said. I'm early. Your father had better conversation. That seems unlikely. Leonard considered him, then laughed once. Send the bill to my sister. She owns half. The second delivery exposed a cracked riser that sprayed water over Eli's chest. The third property had chained its gate without giving him the new combination. He called twice, climbed the fence, tore his jacket, and found the meter buried beneath ornamental gravel installed by the owner's landscaper. At Calder Vineyards, Ruth met him with a torque wrench and a paper sack of donuts. Water entered her west block at 2 in the afternoon. She watched the pressure gauge attached to the riser. Low. 24 here. Main pumps at 31. Leak between, or constriction. Or both, because pipes enjoy companionship. They walked the line until Ruth found a soft patch of ground behind her tasting room. No water surfaced, but the soil smelled wet. Dig tomorrow? She asked. If the root holds. You own a shovel? I inherited a famous one. By the time Eli closed Ruth's gate, daylight was fading. The pump had run nearly 12 hours with only 2 cooling breaks. Its bearings produced a thin whine that made the muscles between his shoulders tighten. He still had May's north block scheduled for an overnight gravity feed. Mercer Orchard's standard turn began the following morning. At 5, Wade's pickup waited at the orchard meter. He stood beside it eating an egg sandwich from a foil wrapper. You're 7 minutes late, he said. I'm surprised you can tell time without Grant. He texted me. That makes sense. Eli checked the meter seal and opened the valve gradually. The buried main shuddered. Water moved toward the orchard, and Wade's expression changed despite himself. He could read pressure through sound and vibration almost as well as Eli. Light, Wade said. 28 pounds. We normally get 35. You normally got whatever Dad wrote down. Wade crouched beside the meter. South block won't reach the end at 28. It might if you fix the lateral. I told you, after bloom. And I told you what saturated roots do. Wade stood. Are you my waterman now, or my agronomist? Waterman. Then give me water. You're getting your allocation at available pressure. The phrasing sounded like Grant. Eli hated it immediately. Wade heard it too. Look at you. 1 week with a clipboard. He walked back to his pickup. Eli stayed until the orchard meter stabilized. The numbers matched his schedule, but Wade was right about the pressure. Somewhere between the river and Mercer's gate, the old system was losing force. He spent the afternoon walking the uphill main. The route crossed 4 properties, vanished under an abandoned access road, then climbed along the edge of Mercer Orchard. Ray's maps showed 2 buried isolation valves in that section. Eli found one beneath 6 inches of soil. The other appeared to exist only in Ray's imagination. At dusk, Grant called. Our west header ran dry at 3:20. You got 8 hours. We were scheduled for 10. The pump pressure dropped. I extended your delivery at lower flow to match volume. Volume is not the only issue. Wade had to shut 2 blocks to maintain spray coverage. Spray? Bloom nutrient application. You didn't tell me you were injecting. It's on the orchard operations calendar. I don't have your calendar. You lived by that calendar for 18 years. I don't now. Silence filled the line. Grant said, Fine, I'll send it. No. Send me water-dependent operations when you request the schedule. Don't send me the whole orchard. I was trying to. You were trying to remind me I'm not in it." Grant's reply came after a moment. "You made that clear enough yourself." Eli stood over the missing isolation valve with the phone pressed hard to his ear. The orchard rows began 20 feet away. He could see Wade moving between them on an ATV, shutting risers by hand. "My leaving didn't make this division fair," Eli said. "No." The quick agreement unsettled him. Grant continued. "But unfair and unworkable can be true at the same time. You practice that one too?" "I haven't had time." Eli rubbed dirt from the old route map. "You lost pressure because the main line is failing somewhere below the orchard. Can you fix it?" "When I find it." "How much?" "I don't know." "Will delivery run tomorrow?" "If the pump does." "That's not an answer. It's the only one I have." Grant ended the call without saying goodnight. The pump bearing began screaming at 11:43. Eli was in May's kitchen, entering meter readings into a spreadsheet on his phone, when the pressure alarm sounded. He drove downhill in his socks because his boots were still by the back door. At the pump house, the motor shook against its mounts. He killed power. Heat rolled from the housing. Ruth arrived 20 minutes later, wearing flannel pajama pants beneath her coveralls. "I said I'd keep it from killing you," she said. "Nothing about itself." They removed the motor cover. The bearing had thrown metal filings across the housing. The shaft turned a fraction, then locked. Eli stared at it. "Can we press a new bearing? With a puller, a shop press, and a bearing we don't have at midnight." Temporary? This was temporary. The next delivery belonged to a 3-acre vegetable farm at 6 in the morning. Mercer Orchard's remaining weekly volume came after that. May's North Block and 2 other properties followed. Eli called every root holder before he called his brothers. Some accepted a delay. Leonard Shaw lectured him for 3 minutes, then offered a spare pump that turned out to be designed for a decorative pond. Grant answered immediately. "How long?" "Don't know yet. We have tanks for tomorrow." "After that, no." "I know." "Do you?" Eli looked at the disabled motor. "Yes." Wade's voice came faintly through Grant's phone. "Ask him if the old Berkeley pump is still at Luis's." Grant repeated the question. "I don't know what that is." "Dad's backup," Wade called louder. "Luis took it home to rebuild 2 winters ago." "Luis Ortega? Unless you know another Luis who steals pumps." "I thought he was your foreman." "He is." "Why is the Roots backup at his house?" Grant said. "Because Dad stopped remembering where he sent things." Eli hung up and called Luis. The foreman answered in Spanish, then switched to English when he recognized Eli's voice. "Your brother says you have Dad's Berkeley pump." "I have pieces of Dad's Berkeley pump." "Can the pieces run?" "Not without making them one piece." "How long?" "What broke?" "Motor bearing seized. Shaft may be scored." Luis was quiet. Eli heard a faucet running and dishes being stacked. "Bring it," Luis said. "You want me to remove the whole assembly? You want to bring me the river?" Ruth helped Eli disconnect the motor and pump shaft. The assembly weighed nearly 200 pounds. They used May's tractor bucket to lift it into the truck, padded by Eli's tarp and both duffel bags. Luis lived in a small stucco house behind a welding shop, 10 miles outside town. Every light in the shop was on when they arrived at 1:30. Wade was already there. He had the old Berkeley pump disassembled across a steel table. Luis, still wearing house slippers beneath his welding apron, cleaned a corroded housing with a wire wheel. "You said you didn't send him," Eli said. "I didn't." Wade nodded toward the ruined motor in the truck. "Grant did." "Grant called you?" "He called Luis. Luis called me." Luis shut off the wire wheel. "Now everyone has called everyone. Very efficient. Put the dead one here." For the next 4 hours, they worked around the steel table. The backup pump needed seals, bearings, and a new coupling plate. Luis had ordered the parts a year earlier at Ray's request, then watched them gather dust because Ray never brought the pump back together. Wade knew how the pieces fit. Eli knew which modifications the river installation required. Ruth rebuilt the motor connections while Luis welded a crack in the mounting bracket. Nobody mentioned the inheritance. At 4, Wade opened a cabinet and produced a bottle of bourbon with 3 inches left in it. "Coffee," Ruth said. "That wasn't the choice. It is if you want the pump facing the correct direction." Luis made coffee strong enough to remove paint. Near dawn, Eli tightened the final coupling bolt. Wade rotated the shaft by hand. It moved smoothly. "That'll run," Luis said. "How long is between you and God?" They loaded the rebuilt pump. In the yard, Wade rested one hand on the truck bed. "Grant's expansion plan needs dependable pressure," he said. "What expansion plan?" "The East Block. New trees after harvest. You're adding acreage, replacing old varieties, with higher density planting." Wade looked at him. "Grant told you?" "No. The water requests did." "It's not your decision." "No. But it's my system you are asking to carry it." Wade removed his hand. "Then make your system work," he said. Eli looked at the pump they had rebuilt together, at Luis's bright shop, at the first pale line of morning behind the hills. "I'm trying." Wade's face softened for half a second. "I know," he said. Then he went inside and left Eli to decide whether that had been encouragement or warning. The rebuilt pump faced the correct direction. That was the first good thing anyone could say about the installation. The second was that it fit the concrete base after Eli widened 2 bolt holes with a file. The third was that Luis had welded lifting eyes onto the housing, which allowed May's tractor to lower it into place without crushing Ruth's fingers or taking out the pressure manifold. By 8, all 4 of them were arguing. "The coupling is high," Wade said. "The base is low," Eli answered. "The base has been there since 1963. Then it's had time to sink." Ruth lay on the floor with one arm behind the motor. "If either of you wants to be useful, stop breathing opinions into the room." Luis stood outside drinking coffee from Ray's cup. He had picked it up without asking, studied the faded orchard logo, and filled it to the rim. Eli noticed Wade noticing. Luis offered him the cup. Wade shook his head. They shimmed the motor, aligned the shafts, and rewired the disconnect. At 9:40, Eli opened the intake gate. Ruth stood beside the breaker. Wade watched the pressure gauge while Luis leaned against the door with the calm of a man whose work had already survived its dangerous part. "Ready?" Ruth asked. "No," Eli said. She threw the switch. The pump started with a deep, steady hum. The pressure needle climbed past 20, then 30. At 34 pounds, the rebuilt check valve shuddered once and seated. No flange leaked, no breaker tripped. Wade touched 2 fingers to the manifold, feeling its vibration. "Better than Dad's primary," he said. "It was Dad's backup," Eli said. "Not anymore." They stood listening. The machine had a quieter voice than the one it replaced. Eli had spent so many nights waiting for the old bearing to scream that silence felt suspicious. At the vegetable farm, water reached the delayed risers at 11:20. The owner, Carla Winslow, met Eli with a stopwatch hanging around her neck. 5 hours and 20 minutes late, she said. "I called. You did." "I'm sorry. You should be." Carla stepped around him and checked the meter. She was short, sunburned, and capable of making a 3-acre farm feel like a military installation. "Pressure's good," she said. 31 at your gate. Better than last year. The pump failed. We rebuilt the backup. I don't need the family biography. I need the next 6 hours without interruption. You'll have it. If I do, we're square." Eli stayed for the first hour. Carla inspected every connection and corrected him twice about which valve fed which row. When the pressure remained stable, she handed him a jar of pickled green beans. "These aren't payment," she said. "I didn't think they were. They're not a gift either. What are they?" "Excess inventory." At Mercer Orchard, Wade had prepared the system before Eli arrived. The known south lateral was shut off. The west header had been flushed. Spray tanks stood full in case pressure dropped. Eli opened the main valve. 32 pounds held at the meter. Wade let out a breath through his nose. "That'll do." It was the closest thing to praise Eli had heard from him since returning. Grant arrived in clean boots 10 minutes later, with a cardboard tray of coffees and an envelope. "Denise finished the appraisal," he said. Wade took a cup. "Does she value my wind machine joke separately?" "She valued it as evidence of deferred maintenance." Grant handed the envelope to Eli. The river parcel, pump house, and root equipment had been valued at less than a quarter of Eli's 1/3 share of the orchard's remaining equity. The buyout difference would be paid over 10 years, with a small initial installment, once the bank approved the restructured operating line. It was not enough to live on. It was enough to repair 1 pump a year, if pumps agreed to fail politely. Eli folded the report. "You think it's wrong?" Grant asked. "I think Denise hates rocks. She used 6 comparable sales. None of them had my scenic pump house." Grant looked toward the orchard meter. Pressure, stable. Thank you. The words sounded formal, almost contractual. Eli tucked the report into the clipboard and took the remaining coffee. On his way out, he saw a roll of white orchard signs in Grant's back seat. The top one showed a drawing of 3 gold pears inside a black circle. Mercer Orchard appeared in large type. Under it, smaller. Grown by brothers, Grant and Wade Mercer. Grant saw where he was looking. Packaging consultant wants a family story, he said. There are 3 pairs. Logo has always had 3, but only 2 brothers. It's copy, Eli. Right. We had to submit the design before Dad died. Then why isn't he in it? Grant closed the car door over the signs. Because dead fathers don't give store demonstrations. Wade turned from the valve. Jesus, Grant. No, he wants me to say we erased him. We didn't. He doesn't own the orchard. I got that part. Eli walked back to his truck. Grant followed. The water business can use the Mercer name. It's in the agreement. That generous? You want the orchard logo? No. Then what do you want? The honest answer was embarrassing. He wanted Grant to pull out a marker and add a 3rd name. He wanted the orchard to claim him without requiring his labor, money, or signature. He wanted Ray alive long enough to object to all of it. Nothing, Eli said. Grant's mouth tightened. That's convenient. The pump ran without failure through the end of the first delivery cycle. Spring warmed quickly. Pear petals fell and left hard green beginnings behind. The river ran high with snowmelt, but less violently than Eli remembered. Stones that should have been underwater showed gray backs near the intake. He established a route rhythm. Before dawn, he cleared the screen. At every gate, he recorded starting pressure, meter reading, and time. At night, he entered numbers at May's kitchen table while she read farm journals and complained about economists who had never owned a shovel. Customers paid slowly. Leonard's sister mailed a check signed in the wrong place. Carla paid in exact installments and continued denying the pickled beans were gifts. Ruth subtracted the cost of 2 electrical lugs from her service bill, then added the same amount under emotional labor. Eli kept the receipt. He repaired Ruth's buried leak and replaced May's south gate when Earl's order arrived. He rebuilt 3 risers with parts scavenged from Ray's shelves. When the intake rack began shedding rusted crossbars, Luis said welding them would be pointless. You need new steel, he said. I need free steel. You need a different business. Luis called a man named Vernon Pike. Vernon arrived the next morning in an immaculate 1987 Ford pickup. He was 72, retired from structural welding, and wore pressed work shirts even when stepping into mud. He examined the intake rack without speaking, then looked at Eli, Ray's youngest. Unfortunately, your father kept water on my cattle troughs during the Benton Ridge fire. Eli had been 13 then. Smoke had hidden the sun for 3 days. He remembered Ray leaving after dark and returning with ash in his hair, but Ray had said only that somebody's line needed clearing. I didn't know that was you, Eli said. Wasn't just me. 4 places along Pike Road. Cooperative shut the upper spur to protect pressure. Ray ran a temporary line from here. Without authorization? Vernon's eyes narrowed approvingly. Now you sound like Grant. Luis coughed into his hand to hide a laugh. Vernon opened his truck and removed a measuring tape. You buy steel. I'll build the rack. I can't pay labor. I didn't ask for labor. I'm not taking favors because of Dad. Good. Take one because this rusty thing will collapse and make everyone's day irritating. They built the new rack over 2 weekends. Vernon insisted on teaching Eli every weld he did not trust him to make. Luis brought a portable generator from the orchard. Ruth wired a pressure cutoff. May fed them sandwiches and openly ranked their work. By the time they lowered the rack into the channel, Eli understood that Ray had not maintained the route alone. He had carried pieces of it in other people, sometimes through payment, sometimes through favor, sometimes by showing up during a fire and refusing to discuss it afterward. That version of Ray irritated Eli almost as much as the other one. A man capable of keeping 4 neighbors' cattle alive should have been capable of leaving a message that said, I need you. The new rack changed the sound of water entering the intake. Flow became smooth, without the old sucking rattle. Vernon stood on the bank, studying it. Your dad would say the left side is half an inch low, he said. Is it? Yes. Are we fixing it? No. He's dead. May laughed so suddenly she dropped the sandwich bag. Eli's first cooperative payment arrived the same afternoon. $600 for the month, less an equipment reserve deduction. Customer service checks brought the total higher, but fuel, parts, power, and insurance consumed nearly all of it. He paid May $80 for 4 weeks of utilities. She marked the envelope paid in red and placed it in a kitchen drawer. "You're saving those?" he asked. "For the eviction hearing." The initial orchard installment cleared 2 days later. Eli could have rented a room or bought a used trailer. Instead, he ordered the pump rebuild kit, replacement feeder cable, and enough pipe to repair the worst section below the orchard. When the materials arrived, Grant came to the river parcel in a new Navy polo bearing the 3-pair logo. "The bank renewed the line," he said. "We're proceeding with the east block." Eli looked past him toward the river. It had fallen another foot. How many new trees? 22 acres replanted at higher density. What variety? Ambrosia apples. They'll need steady water the first 3 years. We know. Snowpack was low. We know. The cooperative's already measuring early. Grant's expression cooled. "Are you warning me as the route operator or criticizing the business?" "Both. We're replacing underperforming acreage. The irrigation design is more efficient if you maintain it." Grant glanced toward the pump house. "You've been back 6 weeks, Eli. Try not to become dad this fast." He walked uphill before Eli found an answer. That evening, an email from the cooperative arrived with the next month's allocation chart. Projected river flow had been revised downward. If conditions continued, restrictions would begin by midsummer. Eli opened the orchard's water request and found Wade had increased it by 18%. Beneath the figures, Grant had added a note. "East block planting starts Monday. Priority establishment water required." Eli read the contract again, though he knew what it said. New trees did not move anyone to the front of the line. Eli answered Grant's note with the approved allocation for Mercer Orchard and a separate line showing the additional volume requested. The second number was followed by "not available under current flow." Grant called before Eli finished brushing his teeth. "Current flow is unrestricted. Current flow is below projection." "So, you're imposing restrictions before the cooperative does?" "I'm not imposing anything. Your request is higher than your historical allocation. We removed 12 acres of old trees and planted 22. With drip irrigation, total use per acre is lower, after establishment, which is why I wrote priority establishment water." Eli spat into May's sink and rinsed his toothbrush. "Priority means the new trees get water before your older blocks. It doesn't mean your orchard gets someone else's share. They aren't using full shares. May's bloom is finished. Calder's West block is established. You can adjust according to crop need. I can adjust timing. I can't invent volume." Grant's voice acquired the careful quality he used when a conversation threatened to become personal. "Come look at the plan before you decide we're idiots." "I never said you were idiots. You have several ways of saying things." The east block had been stripped to bare earth by the time Eli arrived Monday. Stacks of slender apple trees lay beneath damp burlap. White stakes marked rows closer together than any Ray had planted. A rented auger moved down the block, drilling holes, while Wade directed 2 crews and argued with an irrigation supplier on speakerphone. Eli parked near a pile of black drip line. Wade covered the phone. "Tell Grant I don't have the emitters he ordered. Grant didn't send me. Then tell him recreationally." The irrigation design was better than Eli expected. Pressure compensating emitters delivered water directly to each root zone. Moisture sensors had been installed at 3 depths. The old pear block Wade removed had used open micro sprays that watered nearly as much grass as tree. Wade ended the call with the supplier and handed Eli a folded site plan. "Peak use after year, 3 drops 9% compared to the old block," he said. "Your request went up 18 because bare root trees can't wait while we balance your spreadsheet. My spreadsheet is the contract." Same difference lately. They walked the new main line. Wade had sized it correctly and included isolation valves at every sub-block. The filter station, still in pieces beside a pallet, was built to reduce pressure from the orchard header. Eli crouched beside it. "You put the regulator before the sand filter." "That's what the diagram shows. The diagram assumes clean municipal supply. Put it after. River sediment will choke the regulator." Wade studied the printed instructions. Supplier said, "before." Supplier also forgot your emitters. Together, they repositioned the regulator. Wade fetched fittings. Eli aligned the manifold. Their hands fell into an old rhythm, neither acknowledged. Wade moving too quickly. Eli catching the detail, each irritating the other toward accuracy. At noon, they ate sandwiches on overturned planting buckets. "You really sleeping at May's?" Wade asked. "I'm renting for $20 and labor. That's not rent. That's feudalism. She lets me use the castle refrigerator." Wade smiled, then looked across the bare block. The planting crew had begun setting trees. Each one appeared absurdly small against the acreage. "Grant already sold part of the third-year crop," he said. "How do you sell apples that aren't trees yet? Retail contracts, production projections. Sounds safe. It's how we got the bank line." Eli opened his water bottle. "And the new packaging? Grant thinks a gold pear makes people pay $2 more for apples. It's 3 gold pears. The third one's for emotional support." They laughed, but Wade's faded quickly. "We can't hold the old varieties forever," he said. "Dad kept blocks 6 years past profitable because his father planted them. Every time Grant proposed replacing them, Dad acted like he wanted to pave the cemetery. I'm not telling you to keep dead trees. You're telling us the new ones don't get water. I'm telling you they get Mercer's share. And if that's not enough, then why plant all 22 acres this year?" Wade crushed the sandwich wrapper in one hand, because waiting costs money too. Grant arrived in the afternoon carrying moisture reports, projected use charts, and enough irritation for all 3 of them. He walked Eli through the numbers at the hood of his sedan. The plan was not reckless on paper. In an average year, Mercer's allocation could support the new block. In a dry year, efficient irrigation and reduced watering elsewhere might still protect it. In a severe restriction year, something would fail. "This isn't a severe year," Grant said. "You know that?" "No, neither do you." Eli looked toward the hills. Snow remained only in thin white bands where the higher ridges should have held broad fields. "You committed before you knew. So did every farmer who planted anything." Grant rolled the charts together. "I'm not asking you to violate the contract. I'm asking you to exercise judgment. My judgment is to keep your allocation where it is." "You mean Dad's historical number. It's the route number. Dad made those schedules. They're not scripture." "No, they're promises." Grant's expression changed. "You've been listening to May. I've been listening to the people Dad stopped serving, and I've been fixing the financial mess he left. We inherited different versions of the same man. Don't pretend yours is the only honest one." He returned to his sedan. Eli stayed until the first 100 trees were planted. Wade opened the temporary header, and water entered the drip line in a series of small clicks. Dark circles formed around the new roots. At the lower end of the block, pressure fell by 4 pounds. Eli traced the loss back toward the orchard meter. The soft ground behind Ruth's tasting room had dried after he repaired her leak, but the pressure drop remained. Near the abandoned access road, cottonwood roots had pushed through broken asphalt. He found dampness along one edge. The next morning, he cut into the road. The main line lay 5 feet down, instead of the 3 shown on Ray's map. Eli rented a compact excavator with most of the initial orchard installment and spent 2 days exposing the pipe. The crack ran lengthwise beneath a root, thin as a pencil mark, until the line pressurized and opened. Repair required shutting the entire lower root. He scheduled the outage overnight and notified every property. Leonard objected. Carla asked for the exact restart time. Grant replied with a single question mark, then called. "How certain are you it will be back by 6? "Moderately. We need certainty." "You own some?" "We're planting." "So are other people. Not 22 acres. Eli rested his forehead against the excavator cab. "The leak is taking at least 15% of system flow. If I don't repair it now, your new block gets less every day. And if the repair runs long, it gets nothing tomorrow." "Yes." Grant was quiet. "Do it," he said. Vernon brought pipe clamps. Ruth brought portable lights. May brought a stew pot and refused to call it dinner because everyone ate standing up. Wade arrived after the planting crew left and climbed into the excavation without changing out of his orchard boots. The root had bent the pipe downward. Eli cut away the damaged section while Wade pumped muddy water from the trench. They fitted replacement pipe between the old ends, but the upstream coupling would not align. "Your cut's crooked," Wade said. "The pipe's crooked. Pipe didn't hold the saw. You want it? Come take it." Wade climbed out, took the saw, and spent 20 minutes producing a cut no straighter than Eli's. "Beautiful," Eli said. "Shut up." At 3 in the morning, they pressurized the repair. One coupling wept. Vernon tightened it a quarter turn. The leak stopped. The pump held 36 pounds. At Mercer's meter, they had 34. Wade stood beneath the orchard sign, wet to his waist and grinning. 2 pounds lost, he said. That's nothing. It's not nothing. It's close enough to celebrate. He pulled 2 warm beers from his pickup. Eli accepted one. They sat on the tailgate while water moved uphill. The packing barn was dark. New gold pair banners hung along its front wall, furled against the night. Dad would have found something wrong with that repair, Wade said. He would have waited until everyone left. No. He'd tell me in front of Luis. He liked Luis better. Everybody likes Luis better. Wade drank. You know Grant fought him about the route. Dad, when he started missing deliveries. Grant wanted to hire someone. Dad said nobody else knew the old line. He could have called me. He could have done a lot of things. Eli turned the beer can between his hands. Did he ever say why he didn't? He said you were busy. He didn't know that. I think that was the point. Wade stared at the new block, invisible beyond the lower fence. He watched Mom ask for help for 2 years, he said. Hated every second of it. After she died, he acted like needing anybody was something that had killed her. Eli had no answer that did not accuse a dead man or excuse him. They finished the beers before dawn. The repaired main gave the route its best pressure in years. For 3 weeks, schedules held. Mercer Orchard watered its new block without taking more than its share. Grant sent weekly use reports without commentary. Eli began to believe careful work might keep every promise at once. Then June heat arrived in May. The river fell visibly from one delivery cycle to the next. Intake temperature climbed. May's pear leaves curled at the edges by afternoon. Ruth cut irrigation to 1 block voluntarily. Carla began calling twice a day. The cooperative reduced all lower route allocations by 20%. Eli rebuilt the schedule at May's kitchen table, dividing shortages no one considered divisible. At 10 that night, Grant knocked on the back door. He carried the revised orchard allocation in one hand and a bottle of bourbon in the other. The new trees won't make it on this, he said. May glanced at Eli from the living room, then quietly closed her farm journal. Eli did not invite Grant to sit. That's Mercer's share, he said. May can reduce. Calder can reduce. The vineyard's established. They already volunteered cuts. Those are in the numbers. Grant set the bottle on the table, then shortened the smaller deliveries, just until the roots take. That water belongs to them. We gave you the contract. No, Eli said. You gave me the responsibility. Grant looked at him across May's kitchen, and for the first time since the funeral, there was nothing careful in his face. Then be responsible for what happens to us, he said. Grant's bourbon remained between them, unopened. Eli looked at the revised allocation in his hand. You want me to cut people who already cut themselves. I want you to recognize that 3 acres of vegetables and 22 acres of new orchard are not the same exposure. They are to the people paying for 3 acres. Carla Winslow can truck water. So can you. Not at this scale. May entered the kitchen and took a glass from the cupboard. She did not look at either brother. Grant lowered his voice. This is family business. May filled the glass at the tap. Then conduct it without using my kitchen table. He picked up the bourbon. You were happy to use Mercer water for 30 years, he said. May turned off the tap. I paid for Mercer water. Last year I paid and did not receive it. Your brother is fixing that? My father was sick. I know. You could have told us how bad the line was. I did. Grant opened his mouth, then closed it. May sipped water. You're not wrong that the new trees are in danger. You're wrong that their thirst became everyone else's bill because your last name is painted on a barn. Grant looked at Eli. You've got your jury. She gave me a room, not a legal education. I'll make the request in writing. Do that. And if the orchard loses the block? Eli forced himself not to look away. Then it loses the block. Grant flinched as though Eli had said something obscene. He left the revised allocation on the table and carried the bourbon out with him. May waited until his headlights disappeared. You could have said it kinder, she said. You just told him his last name was Paint. I'm older. I have fewer years to fit everything in. Eli folded the paper along its existing crease. He wanted an answer. No, he wanted permission. The new trees looked worse in daylight. Their leaves had softened and curled inward. giving the rows a tired silver cast. Wade moved through the east block with a moisture probe and a bucket of replacement emitters. He ignored Eli until they reached the same sensor station. Grant said, "You killed the request. I approved the orchard share." "Not what I said." Eli pushed the probe into the soil beside a tree. The upper 6 inches were moist. Below that, the reading dropped sharply. "You're watering too often," he said. Wade took the probe from him. "That's a new one. Surface is wet, roots are dry. Short cycles aren't reaching depth. Pressure falls if we run longer." It held after the main repair. At the meter, not at the end emitters. They checked the filter station. The regulator Eli had moved was clean, but the sand filter had collected enough river sediment to restrict flow. Wade flushed it. Brown water sprayed into the grass. Pressure at the last row rose 3 pounds. "Run half the block at a time," Eli said. "Longer cycles, alternate days, mulch the root zones. On 22 acres, you planted 22. Wade drove the moisture probe into the ground harder than necessary. "You enjoying this?" "What?" "Being the man with the answer." Eli stared at him. "No." "Grant says you don't sound worried." Grant hears what helps him stay mad. "Are you worried?" Eli looked down the rows. Every tree represented nursery costs, labor, irrigation parts, a sales forecast, and years of work before the first profitable crop. Wade had planted them with his own hands beside the crew's. Grant had staked money and promises on fruit that did not yet exist. "Yes," Eli said. "I'm worried." Some tension left Wade's shoulders. They spent the afternoon dividing the irrigation manifold into smaller zones. Eli stayed through the first long cycle, checking emitters while Wade spread mulch with a crew. The deepest sensor finally registered moisture. It was a micro-solution in a field-sized problem. Wade knew it. So did Eli. Still, by evening, the worst trees had lifted their leaves. Grant did not thank him. Instead, Grant began calling the lower route customers. Eli learned about it from Carla, who met him at her gate with a printed email in one hand. "Your brother says you have authority to shift unused allocation toward urgent crop establishment. I have authority to schedule approved water according to need. He offered to pay me to reduce my next 2 deliveries. Did you agree?" "No, my lettuce lacks family loyalty." The email was polite. Grant described Mercer Orchard as the valley's largest employer on the route and framed temporary reductions as a cooperative measure to protect long-term agricultural stability. He did not explicitly criticize Eli. He did not need to. One sentence said the route operator had declined to make voluntary adjustments without direct consent from individual holders. "He's making it sound like you want us to tell you no," Carla said. "He wants you to tell me yes." I understood the language. Did he call everyone? Leonard, Ruth, May. Probably anyone with a telephone and a crop he considers less photogenic. Eli folded the email. "He can ask, and I can say no." "Yes." Carla studied him. "You really would let those trees die?" "I'm trying not to let anything die." "That's not an answer. It's the only one I have." He drove to Ruth's next. She had agreed to reduce 1 overnight cycle in exchange for Grant paying to truck water to her tasting room block. Leonard offered 10% of his next delivery, then changed his mind when his sister learned he had negotiated without her. May refused Grant's call before he finished introducing the idea. The reductions amounted to enough water for 1 deep cycle on half the east block. Eli added it to the schedule and sent acknowledgments to everyone involved. Grant replied, "This is what judgment looks like." Eli deleted 3 answers before sending. Confirmed. Heat pressed down on the valley. The river lost its spring color and turned clear over exposed stones. Dust coated the orchard roads. At the pump house, the rebuilt motor ran hot despite Ruth's electrical repairs. Eli rigged shade over the exterior line and adjusted cycles to allow longer cooling periods. Every change offended somebody. Leonard complained that his delivery began at midnight. Carla accused Leonard of using more than his meter showed. Ruth found 2 unreported stock troughs on an adjoining parcel and threatened to cap them herself. May's old dog, which belonged to no contract and obeyed no boundary, slept in the channel path and had to be moved before every inspection. Eli stopped sleeping through the night. Pressure alarms, meter alarms, and imagined alarms followed him into May's spare room. He woke once standing beside the dresser with a golf ball in his hand, convinced it was a valve knob. May took it from him. You need a day off. Water doesn't. Water had several billion years before you arrived. It still found ways to cause problems. She sat on the edge of the bed. Your father slept like this, boots on, one ear open. Then he got tired enough to make the mistakes that kept him awake. I'm not Dad. No, you apologize. That morning, pressure dropped 6 pounds across the upper main. There was no surface leak near the section Eli had repaired. He checked every isolation point, then found the loss between the abandoned access road and Mercer Orchard's lower boundary. Ray's map showed the pipe cutting beneath an old equipment lane, now used to reach the east block. Eli loaded the compact excavator, pipe, clamps, and gravel. The rental had eaten another piece of his buyout installment, but hand-digging 5 feet through compacted road was impossible. At the orchard entrance, a new chain stretched across the service road. A painted sign hung from it. Active farm operations. Authorized vehicles only. Eli unlocked the outer gate with his easement key. The new chain used a different padlock. Beyond it, 3 stacks of empty harvest bins blocked the road. Wade arrived on an ATV 10 minutes after Eli called. Open it, Eli said. Use the lower route. The lower route won't carry the excavator. Then get a smaller excavator. The pipe is under your equipment lane. The pipe crosses our property. The road is ours. The agreement includes service access, reasonable access, not 24-hour access through active planting. There's a 6-pound loss. We're irrigating. Exactly. You're losing water before it reaches you. Wade removed his sunglasses. His eyes were red from heat and lack of sleep. You cut us 20%. The cooperative cut everyone. You gave Ruth an extra hour Tuesday. She had lower flow because your cycle overlapped during the pressure change. I restored her volume. And you shortened ours, to remain inside your allocation. Wade climbed off the ATV. Grant wants written notice before you bring equipment through. Grant got notice. I emailed both of you at 6. Written notice with 48 hours. The line is leaking now, and the east block is running now. You bring that machine through, shut down the main, and tear up the lane. Those trees go another day without water. If I don't repair it, they get less every day. Wade looked at the excavator, then at Eli's truck. Tomorrow, he said. I can't wait. You can always wait when it's someone else's crop. He put his sunglasses back on and drove away. Eli called Grant. The call went to voicemail. He called Wade again. No answer. The service easement curved below the blocked road, following the buried pipe through blackberry and compacted basalt. The suspected leak lay nearly 200 yards uphill. Without machinery, he would have to locate it with a probe and shovel, one narrow hole at a time. Eli drove the excavator back to Mays and unloaded it. Then he returned with Ray's shovel, the pressure map, and every length of probing rod he owned. By sunset, he had opened 4 holes. All were dry. His palms blistered beneath his gloves. Dust coated his teeth. Above him, the east block's emitters clicked faintly along the rows, carrying reduced water toward the trees his brothers had chosen over him. At the 5th hole, the probe came back damp. Eli knelt and smelled the soil. River water. He began digging. Darkness settled before the hole reached his knees. Headlights appeared on the lower road. 1 pair, then another, then 3 more. Ruth's white van stopped first. May's Subaru pulled in behind it. Carla climbed out of a farm truck carrying 2 shovels. Luis and Vernon arrived together with lights, a generator, and the portable pump. Ruth looked uphill at the locked chain and stacked bins. Your family always throws such friendly work parties? She asked. Eli leaned on Ray's shovel, too tired to hide what their arrival did to him. Only for people they don't invite, he said. Carla handed Eli the extra shovel. Point, she said. He pointed to the damp hole. Main should run there to there, 5 feet deep, maybe more. Maybe. Dad's map says 3. Your father's map is a work of fiction, May said. Vernon aimed a portable light into the hole. No one goes deeper until we widen it. Walls are too straight. I don't have time to build a swimming pool, Eli said. You also don't have time to be buried in one. They widened the excavation in shifts. Ruth and Carla stripped the upper soil. Luis cut through roots. Vernon shaped one side into rough steps and stopped everyone twice to inspect the wall. May operated the portable pump. When groundwater began seeping into the bottom, Eli dug. The line appeared at 4 feet 8 inches, deep enough that his shoulders barely cleared the hole. Water shone along the pipe, but did not reveal its source. He cleaned mud away with his hands. "Pressurize for 10 seconds," he called. May radioed Ruth at the pump house. The pipe jumped. A spray of water burst from somewhere uphill, struck the wall, and sent a sheet of dirt over Eli's face. "Off!" The pressure died. Luis hauled him out by the back of his jacket. Eli spat mud and wiped his eyes. "Found it," Carla said. A buried T branched from the main toward Mercer Orchard's old equipment yard. The branch had been capped after Ray rerouted the orchard line years earlier. Soil movement had cracked the cap around its threads. At full pressure, the opening sprayed directly into compacted gravel, where the water disappeared downhill without reaching the surface. "Why leave the T?" Ruth asked. "Because removing it required cutting the main," Eli said. "Which you now have to do. Dad probably planned to come back." May looked at him. "He planned a great many things after lunch." Vernon inspected the fitting. "We cut here and here, replaced the whole section. The spare pipes at the excavator." "Behind the lock gate?" Carla asked. "At May's." Luis went for it in his truck. While they waited, Eli sat on the edge of the excavation drinking water. His hands trembled from fatigue. May wrapped one blister with gauze and ignored his objections. Carla stood over him. "Grant told Leonard you were turning this into a personal contest." Eli looked up. "When?" "Yesterday." "What exactly did he say?" "He said you were more interested in proving independence than protecting the largest farm on the route." May pulled the tape tighter. Eli winced. "That seems clear enough," May said. Carla crossed her arms. "Leonard repeated it to Ruth. Ruth repeated it to me, with several decorative words removed." "I used one decorative word," Ruth said. "You repeated it 7 times. Headlights appeared above the chain. Grant stepped from his sedan, wearing slacks and a blue dress shirt, as though he had left a restaurant. He took in the vehicles, lights, generator, and open excavation below the orchard road. Behind him, Wade arrived on the ATV. "What the hell is this?" Grant called. "A personal contest," Carla said. Grant looked at her, then at Eli. Eli stood. The abandoned T failed. "Luis is getting pipe. You organized all this?" "They showed up." "Why didn't you call us?" "I did." Grant took out his phone. 3 missed calls showed on the screen. "I was at a distributor dinner, and I was busy enjoying myself." Wade climbed down the slope. "You found it?" Eli led him to the hole and aimed the light at the broken cap. Wade swore. "Dad capped that after the loading pad moved. He didn't remove the T. He said he did." Dad said a lot of things. The phrase belonged to Grant. Hearing it from Eli made both brothers still. Grant walked to the locked chain. He removed a key from his pocket and opened the padlock. "Move the bins," he told Wade. Wade did not move. "You had a key?" Eli asked. "It's orchard property. You told me 48 hours. I told you tomorrow. Open access was 100 yards away. The east block was running. It was losing 15% through that T. We didn't know that. I knew the main was leaking." Grant stepped between them. "Move the bins, Wade. I'm not leaving the east lane open all night." "Then stand there and guard it." The sharpness in Grant's voice surprised everyone. Wade stared at him, then returned to the ATV. He drove uphill without answering. Carla watched him go. Touching family reunion. Grant looked toward her. "I'm sorry I contacted you directly. You should be sorry you described Eli as some kind of water tyrant. I didn't use those words. You found fancier ones." Grant rubbed one hand over his face. "I'm trying to keep 80 acres of crop and 22 acres of new planting alive, and I'm trying to keep 3 acres alive. I know that. Do you?" Grant looked older under the work lights. His shirt was damp at the collar, and orchard dust had settled over his polished shoes. "I know exactly what every acre costs," he said. Luis returned with the pipe. Wade followed in a forklift, carrying the compact excavator's bucket as an improvised tray loaded with clamps, gravel, and tools. He had moved the bins. Nobody apologized. They cut the main at midnight. The old pipe recoiled when tension released, confirming the ground had shifted. Eli measured twice. Wade measured after him and got the same number without comment. Luis held the replacement section while Vernon aligned the couplings. Grant ran for tools, fetched water, and stayed out of the hole because no one trusted his shoes. Carla timed each shutdown interval. Ruth monitored pump pressure over the radio. At 2:15, they restored the line. The repair held at 38 pounds. Water reached Mercer Orchard at 36. May poured coffee into paper cups. Grant accepted one and leaned against a harvest bin. "How much water were we losing?" he asked. "About 17% at peak pressure," Eli said. Grant closed his eyes. "Your reduced allocation will go farther now," Eli added. "Not far enough." "No?" Grant opened his eyes. "I shouldn't have said you were enjoying this." "No, you shouldn't." "I didn't say those exact words." Eli stared at him. "But I meant them," Grant admitted. "I thought you liked being the one who could tell us no. Sometimes I like telling you no." Wade snorted into his coffee. Eli continued, "I don't like what the no costs." Grant turned the paper cup in his hands. "I can't tell the bank we lost the new block because my brother gave 3 acres of lettuce equal moral standing. Then tell them the river dropped. That sounds better on a loan report. It has the advantage of being true." Grant finished the coffee and crushed the cup carefully, pressing the rim inward until it fit inside his fist. At dawn, the volunteers left one by one. Carla reminded Eli that her meter began at 6. Ruth took the portable lights. Vernon told him to shore the hole properly before filling it, then inspected the backfill anyway. Wade remained beside the repaired section. "I'll keep the access road open," he said. "Call before you bring equipment." I called. Call twice. Eli wanted the concession to feel larger. It did not. The chain stayed, but Wade gave him a key to the new padlock. There were now 2 brass keys on Eli's ring. One for the inheritance his brothers had not wanted, one for passage through what they had kept. The repaired main bought everyone time. Pressure improved enough that Mercer Orchard could run longer, deeper cycles on the new trees. Ruth restored one of the hours she had surrendered. Carla stopped calling every morning. Leonard's sister assumed control of their scheduling and proved easier to deal with than Leonard, which he regarded as betrayal. Restrictions deepened again in July. The cooperative reduced allocations another 10% and moved the compliance review forward to the first week of August. Eli received a checklist covering delivery logs, meter accuracy, intake condition, emergency shutoffs, customer complaints, and proof that the route could maintain required pressure at its farthest point. He taped the checklist above May's kitchen table. "You stare at it while you eat," she said. "I'm memorizing. You memorized it the first day. I'm worrying in an organized way. Your father preferred loose sheets all over the truck. The farthest meter belonged to Leonard. During a test cycle, pressure fell below the required minimum by 2 pounds. Eli adjusted the intake, flushed the upper main, and gained 1 pound. The missing pound kept him awake for 3 nights. He found it in a half-closed valve on an unoccupied parcel. Ray had wired the wheel to stop it from opening fully, probably because the stem leaked. Eli replaced the packing, removed the wire, and passed his own test by 1/2 pound. At Mercer Orchard, the new block survived. The older blocks paid for it. Wade reduced water to mature pear rows and thinned fruit heavily to lessen stress. Trees dropped leaves early along the south edge where the old lateral remained saturated from the leak Wade had postponed repairing. Eli pointed it out again. "I don't have crew hours," Wade said. "You have water standing over roots. I know what I have." They stood ankle-deep in the wet grass. Above them, immature pears hung sparsely from yellowing branches. "You could shut this section and dig it now," Eli said, "and pull people off thinning. Then we lose market size across 4 blocks. You may lose these trees. I may lose them anyway." Wade turned away, then stopped. "Grant signed a packaging contract based on a bigger crop," he said. "We fall under volume, the price jumps. We lose enough volume, the buyer walks. So, you're watering fruit you can sell. I'm watering the orchard that exists. And the roots." Wade looked back at the standing water. "Roots don't make payroll this month." The answer sounded like Grant, but the exhaustion was Wade's own. A hot wind began after noon, pushing dust down the rows. It carried a faint smell of smoke from somewhere west of the river. By evening, the sun had turned orange. Eli checked the county fire map. A brush fire burned 20 miles away near Benton Ridge. Small, listed as contained, no immediate threat. The cooperative sent an advisory asking route operators to verify emergency access and maintain full intake clearance during red flag conditions. Eli drove to the river after dark. Cottonwood leaves spun silver in the rising wind. Branches had already fallen across the channel. He cleared them, checked the new rack, and tested the spillway gate. It moved 6 inches, then jammed. He worked the wheel back and forth until rust flaked into his palms. The gate opened another inch and stopped. Behind him, the pump ran steadily, sending the valley's reduced water uphill through a system that had not been built for every promise being made of it. Eli called Wade. "I need the orchard's come along and 2 lengths of chain," he said. "For what?" "The spillway." "Can it wait until morning?" Wind struck the pump house hard enough to make the metal roof lift and settle. "No," Eli said. "I don't think it can." Wade arrived with the come along at 11:30. He had brought 3 chains, a pry bar, 2 flashlights, and the expression of a man who resented being correct about the weather. "You said 2 lengths," he called over the wind. "I like having choices. You like making other people carry choices." They anchored the come-along to the cottonwood and wrapped 1 chain through the spillway wheel. The gate controlled a concrete side channel that returned diverted water to the river. Open, it lowered the delivery channel so the intake could be cleared or repaired. Closed, it kept every available inch moving toward the pumps. Ray had greased the gear housing, but ignored the gate guides. Silt and rust packed both sides. Eli climbed down beside the wheel. "Hold tension. Don't crank until I say." That sentence has killed people, only impatient people. The first pull bent 1 chain hook. The second tore loose a mat of roots. On the third, the gate moved with a groan that traveled through the concrete. Water rushed beneath it, brown and fast. "Stop," Eli said. Wade locked the ratchet. They shone their lights into the opening. The gate had lifted 8 inches, enough to drop the channel quickly if debris choked the intake. Eli reversed the come-along and lowered it again. The gate settled into place without jamming. "Good," he said. Wade looked toward the east, where the orchard lay beyond the dark ridge. "How much flow do we lose when that opens?" "At 8 inches, 40%. Maybe more as the channel drops." "For how long?" "As long as it takes." "That's not an answer." "You've been talking to Grant. He's better at answers. His just arrived before the facts." Wade crouched to release the chain. The wind tore his cap off and threw it against the pump house wall. He retrieved it, brushed away grit, and put it on backward. "The east block gets a long cycle tomorrow," he said. "We've been waiting 4 days under the new schedule." "I know. Don't test the spillway during it. I just tested it. Don't open it. If I need to, I will." Wade pulled the chain free. "You enjoy saying that?" Grant already tried that line. "Maybe because it's true." Eli stepped toward him. "You think I want your trees dry? I think you want us to admit you matter." The wind pushed between them, hot and smelling of sage and distant ash. "That orchard made me feel unnecessary before you ever took it," Eli said. "I don't need to punish it. Could have fooled me." Wade carried the chains uphill without looking back. By dawn, the fire near Benton Ridge had doubled in size. The orange glow was not visible from Bellwether, but smoke covered the valley in a low brown lid. Ash settled on May's porch like gray flour. The wind shook unripe pears from her trees and rolled them along the rows. Eli began Mercer Orchard's long cycle at 5:12. Pressure held at 34 pounds. Wade sent readings from the east block every hour. The new trees were receiving enough water. The old south block, still wet around the leaking lateral, remained shut down. At 8, the cooperative emailed that the compliance review would proceed the following morning unless emergency conditions worsened. At 9, a branch struck the delivery channel above the intake. Eli heard the change through the pump. Pressure dipped, recovered, then dipped again. He found a cottonwood limb lying across the water, leaves and smaller branches collecting behind it. The new intake rack stopped the debris, but the growing mat raised water upstream and starved the pump below. He shut the motor down, dragged the branch loose with a chain, and restarted delivery in 23 minutes. Wade called at 24. "We lost pressure. It's back." "What happened?" "Branch." "You opening the spillway?" "No." "You planning to?" "I'm planning not to." Wade heard the distinction. "Call before you do." At 10:30, a county water tender came down the river road with its amber lights flashing. A brush engine followed, red paint dulled by ash. Eli met them at the outer gate. The woman in charge introduced herself as Captain Marisol Vega. Her crew had been assigned to protect structures along Pike Road if the Benton Ridge fire crossed the containment line. "We've got hydrants on the highway," she said, "but turn around slow and pressure's dropping." Cooperative said, "You have a river intake and a 3-inch standpipe." Eli glanced toward the pump house. The standpipe stood behind it, capped and unused except during annual flushing. "It feeds from the delivery main. Can we draft from the channel?" "Not with this debris. Intake's safer. How much can you give us?" "Depends how often you need to fill." Captain Vega looked at the smoke. "More often than your customers will like." The contract required emergency access, but Eli did not need the clause to answer. Ray had filled troughs during the Benton Ridge fire years earlier. The route existed because people had treated water as a shared survival before anyone reduced it to scheduled gallons. "You can use the standpipe," Eli said. "I need 10 minutes to isolate the pressure tank." He called every route holder. Ruth said, "Do it," before he finished explaining. Carla asked how long, muttered something sharp when he said he did not know, then agreed. Leonard's sister answered for both of them. May was already opening gates to move water into a holding pond. Grant did not answer. Wade did. "You're taking orchard flow for fire trucks? Emergency standpipe use reduces line pressure. I can extend your cycle afterward if the intake stays clear." "Our cycle is now." "I know. We waited 4 days. So did everyone. Pike Road isn't even under evacuation. It's under protection. Use the channel. It's full of storm debris. Then clear it. I'm doing both." Wade's voice rose. "You can't save every property between here and Benton and call whatever happens to us fair. No, I can't. Don't open that spillway." The water tender's diesel engine idled behind Eli. Captain Vega pretended not to listen. "I'll call if I have to," Eli said. He connected the standpipe. The first fill took 19 minutes and pulled main pressure down to 18 pounds. At Mercer Orchard, the drip line stopped regulating. Wade sent a photograph of the end emitter producing a weak trickle. Eli paused delivery while the tender left and restored orchard pressure. The east block received 40 minutes before the truck returned. By noon, 2 more brush engines had arrived. Smoke thickened. The fire had crossed one containment line, though it remained miles from the lower farms. Wind gusts threw branches into the diversion channel faster than Eli could remove them. Ruth came with a pole saw. Vernon brought logging chains. Luis arrived in the orchard utility truck with 2 crew members Wade could not spare, and Grant had apparently released anyway. Grant finally called. "What did you commit us to?" "Nothing. I committed the route. The route includes us." "Yes." "How long will emergency use continue?" "Ask the fire. I'm asking the operator." "I don't know." Eli heard voices behind Grant, phones ringing, the hollow acoustics of the packing office. Grant said, "Our retail buyer is here. He drove from Seattle to inspect crop projections. That sounds badly timed. He's looking at stressed new trees while pressure alternates on and off. I can't change the timing. You can use judgment. I am. That answer is getting expensive. So is the fire." Grant lowered his voice. "No one has asked you to fight the fire. They asked for water. You always did this." "Did what?" "Found the one job nobody else could see, then hated us for not applauding." Eli stood beside the standpipe while the second engine filled. Water hammered through the hose. "I don't have time for this," he said. That used to be Dad's line. Grant ended the call. At 1:15, the upper channel jammed. Not one branch this time. A section of cottonwood crown had fallen across the narrowest bend and collected an entire raft of brush behind it. Water climbed the bank, spilled across the service path, and dropped below the intake on the other side. The pump sucked air and cavitated with a sound like rocks inside the housing. Eli killed it. The fire crews lost the standpipe. All farm deliveries stopped. Ruth waded to the edge of the blockage and pushed a pole into it. "That's under pressure. If we cut the wrong limb, it rolls," Vernon said. "Can we pull it from the bank?" Luis asked. "Not with the channel full," Eli said. He looked toward the spillway. Opening it would release most of the backed water to the river, lower the channel, and take pressure off the debris. It would also leave the pumps without enough head to deliver until the obstruction was cleared and the gate closed again. Captain Vega approached from the standpipe. "I've got 1 tender half full and 2 engines dry. How much water do they carry?" 750 each. Channel clears, I can fill them. "How long?" Eli watched branches bend above the concrete banks. "More debris could fall at any moment. An hour if everything goes right." Vernon said, 2. Captain Vega nodded. "We can shuttle from the highway for 1 cycle. After that, Pike Road loses local cover. Eli called Grant and Wade together. "I'm opening the spillway," he said. "Channel's blocked. We can't run the pump or the emergency standpipe until it's clear." Grant spoke first. "How long?" 1 to 2 hours. "No," Wade said. "The pump's already off. Leave the channel high, pull the tree from above. It's loaded. Somebody gets under that, it can kill them. Use the excavator. It can't reach safely from the bank." Wade's breathing filled the line. "You promised to extend our cycle." "I will when flow is restored." "If flow is restored, yes." Grant said, "What happens to the contract if emergency supply fails during tomorrow's review?" Eli almost laughed. Even now, Grant found the line item beneath the fear. "It doesn't help. And if you open the spillway, it proves the emergency system works as designed." "At our expense," Wade said. "At everyone's. Our trees are already stressed. So are May's. So are Carla's, Ruth's vines, Leonard's apricots. That isn't the decision in front of me. It is the decision in front of me." Eli looked at the stalled water tender and the ash collecting on its windshield. "I'm opening it," he said. "Eli," Grant warned, "I called because I said I would, not because I need permission." He ended the call. May arrived as he and Vernon rigged the come-along. Carla followed with 2 farm hands and a cooler. Ruth positioned the pole saw. Luis backed the utility truck into place as an anchor. Even Leonard appeared, wearing the same quilted coat, despite the heat, and carrying an axe nobody allowed him to use. Captain Vega's crew laid hose toward the channel in case sparks carried downwind. Eli pulled the spillway chain tight. "Ready?" Vernon asked. "No," Eli said. "Good enough." They cranked. The gate resisted, then lifted. Water exploded through the 8-inch opening and tore foam down the concrete return toward the river. The delivery channel began to fall. The debris shifted with a deep wooden crack. "Back!" Vernon shouted. A branch rolled free and struck the bank where Ruth had been standing seconds earlier. Everyone retreated. The jam settled lower, exposing the main trunk. Above them, an ATV engine roared down the orchard road. Wade stopped at the open gate, jumped off, and ran toward the spillway. "What did you do?" he shouted. Eli kept one hand on the come-along. "Exactly what I told you." Wade reached for the ratchet release. Vernon stepped between them. "Move," Wade said. "No," Vernon answered. "This is family property. This is a water route." Wade looked beyond him and saw the people along the channel, May in the mud with a rope around her waist, Ruth holding the pole saw, Carla dragging branches clear, Luis securing chain, fire crews waiting beside empty engines. No one was watching Eli for instructions because he owned them. They watched because he had shown up at their gates, repaired their lines, measured their water, and kept his word when keeping it cost him. Wade's hand fell away from the ratchet. A sharp report carried across the valley, too loud for a branch and too low for thunder. Wade turned toward the orchard. A white plume rose above the lower rows. For 1 second, neither brother moved. Then Wade said, "That's the main." Wade ran uphill. Eli wanted to follow. Every instinct trained into him at Mercer Orchard answered that white plume. The sight of water where water should not be, the invisible damage beneath it, the clock beginning the moment pressure escaped. The block channel shifted again. Vernon gripped Eli's shoulder. This first. Captain Vega had already sent one engine back toward the highway. The other crew waited beside the half-full tender. May and Carla held a guide rope attached to the main trunk. Ruth stood ready with the pole saw. Eli looked uphill once more. Wade's ATV disappeared beyond the gate. This first, he agreed. They lowered the channel another 6 inches. Water boiled through the spillway and returned to the river in a brown torrent. As pressure came off the jam, individual limbs rose from the tangle. Luis hooked a chain around the largest accessible branch. The utility truck pulled slowly. The branch slid 10 feet, caught beneath the trunk, and lifted it enough for Ruth to reach a smaller limb. She started the saw. Wood chips flew sideways in the wind. The severed limb snapped upstream, struck the concrete wall, and vanished through the spillway. "Again," Eli said. They worked from the outside inward, removing whatever the water presented without putting anyone below the trunk. Leonard ignored instructions and waited too close with his axe until Carla took it away from him. "I've cleared more ditches than you've eaten meals," he told her. "Then you're old enough to know better." May pulled him back by his coat. Grant arrived in Wade's pickup. He had changed out of his dress shirt, but still wore the polished shoes. One was untied. The orchard main split below the south block, he said. Wade got the reservoir valve closed. He needs the excavator. It's here? At the upper lane. Good. He needs you. So do they. Grant looked at the waiting fire engine, then at the channel. How long? Still don't know. The break is flooding the lower pair rows. The reservoir valve's closed? Yes. Then it can wait. Grant stared at him. Behind them, Ruth's saw bit into another branch. If those roots sit in water, I told Wade that in April. Grant's face tightened. This is not the moment. No, it was the moment. For a second, Eli thought Grant might grab him. Instead, Grant took off his shoes and socks, rolled his jeans to his knees, and stepped into the mud beside Luis. What do I do? He asked. Luis pointed to the cut branches piling along the bank. Make those not there. Grant began dragging. The main trunk came free at 312. It rolled toward the intake, caught against the new steel rack, and stopped with a crash that shook the pump house wall. The rack bowed but held. Eli waded to it with a chain. Water hit above his knees, cold and powerful after hours in the heat. Luis and Vernon steadied him from the bank with the guide rope. He passed the chain beneath the trunk. A submerged branch snagged his pant leg and pulled his foot sideways. The current knocked him against the rack. Pain flashed through his right hand. He came up gripping the steel with his left. His right ring finger bent at an angle, fingers did not bend. May saw it. Out. Chains through. Eli. Pull it. Vernon attached the come-along. Eli climbed from the channel using his left hand while Luis took over the chain. May caught Eli's wrist before he could hide it. It's dislocated, she said. I noticed. Captain has a medic. After the trunk. Now. The medic pulled the finger straight beside the pump house while the others winched the cottonwood from the rack. Eli swore loudly enough for Leonard to look impressed. The medic splinted 2 fingers together and told him to get an x-ray. Tonight, she said. Sure, you said that like a liar. It's a regional accent. At 3:41, Eli began closing the spillway. The gate resisted halfway down, then ceded under the weight of the channel. Water rose behind the intake rack. Small branches collected and slid cleanly aside as Vernon had designed. Eli primed the rebuilt pump one-handed. It started. Pressure climbed to 36 pounds. Captain Vega's crew connected to the standpipe. The first dry engine filled in 17 minutes. The second returned from the highway and filled after it. With local water restored, both headed toward Pike Road, their red lights disappearing into the smoke. The route holders watched the trucks leave. Nobody cheered. There was too much left to do. Eli checked the delivery manifold. Mercer Orchard's valve was closed at the route meter. Wade had isolated the entire property rather than let the broken internal main drain pressure from everyone else. Carla's delivery resumed first. Because her scheduled cycle had been interrupted, Ruth's followed. May waved away her own turn. My pond has enough for tonight, she said. Get up there. The orchard smelled of wet dust and broken leaves. Water had carved a brown path through the lower rows, depositing gravel, bark, and pieces of black irrigation line against tree trunks. The burse lay near the same south block where Eli had found standing water after the funeral. Wade had used the excavator to expose a length of 8-inch main. A crack split the pipe along its lower side for nearly 4 feet. The orchard reservoir valve stood closed uphill. Below the break, water remained knee-deep in the excavation. Wade operated a transfer pump, sending it into an empty drainage swale. He looked at Eli's taped fingers. What happened? Rack 1. You need a hospital. Medic reset it. That isn't a hospital. You need a pipe. Wade shut off the transfer pump. Wind drove smoke between the rows. Behind them, young apple trees bent against their stakes, leaves snapping like small flags. The crack was old, Wade said. Eli crouched beside the excavation. Rust-colored staining marked the underside of the pipe. The initial fracture had probably begun years earlier. Repeated pressure changes widened it until the long delivery cycle and emergency fluctuations finished the work. It was leaking before today, Eli said. I know, you knew. I knew the south lateral was leaking. This is the main feeding it. I thought it was the lateral. You didn't dig. Wade rubbed both hands over his face, leaving mud across his cheeks. You told me to dig 4 times. I know. Then why didn't you? Because I had planting, thinning, filters, crews, Grant calling about projections. Dad's machines breaking in order of importance. Wade kicked at the wet soil. Because you said it. Because every time you warned me, I heard my little brother coming home and telling me how to run the orchard I kept alive while he was gone. The honesty was not an apology, but it was close enough to hurt. Eli examined the pipe ends. We need to replace 10 feet, maybe 12. I have 6. Vernon? Already called. Luis took him to get more. Grant came down the row carrying a shovel and his polished shoes. He had put his socks inside them and tied the laces together. The buyer left, he said. Wade looked up. What did he say? That we should revisit volume commitments after harvest estimates stabilize, which means? It means the packaging discount is gone unless we hit the original number. We won't. Grant looked over the flooded rows. Piers floated in the drainage swale. Some had fallen in the wind. Others had been knocked loose by the water. No, he said. We won't. Eli expected him to ask how soon orchard delivery could resume. Grant looked at the splint instead. Is that broken? Maybe. You should get it checked. That's becoming a popular opinion. Grant set down the shovel. Go. Wade and I can handle this until the pipe arrives. Wade looked at him. What? Grant asked. We can dig. We're not hand digging 12 feet. We have an excavator. You don't know how to operate it. I know how to make it move. That's not the same thing. Grant picked up the shovel again. Then teach me. Eli stayed. With his injured hand held against his chest, he marked the safe cut points and guided Wade's excavation. Grant shoveled gravel from beneath the main. He was terrible at it. Too much force, wrong angle, pausing every few minutes to remove stones from his shoes, even though he was not wearing them. The wind weakened near sunset. Luis returned with Vernon and 2 12-foot pipe sections. May brought sandwiches nobody called dinner. Ruth arrived after confirming her vineyard pressure and took over the portable pump. Carla sent coffee and a note that said her lettuce continued to lack family loyalty, but appreciated functioning infrastructure. The new section would not align. The old main had settled unevenly, just as the root line had beneath the abandoned road. Wade wanted to force it into place with the excavator bucket. Vernon threatened to walk home. You bend that pipe, Vernon said. I will let you discover consequences in your own time. They dug farther, relieved the tension, and built a gravel bed. Eli showed Grant how to level it using a straight board and a carpenter's level. Grant redid the same section 3 times. This is why I handle invoices, he said. This is why invoices hate you less. Near midnight, the coupling plates aligned. Wade tightened the bolts in a crossing pattern. Eli checked each one with his left hand and made him redo 2. I knew you'd find something, Wade said. You were counting on it. I was. The admission passed quietly between them. They restored pressure in stages. Wade opened the reservoir valve 1/4 turn, then half. The repaired main filled without movement. Ruth watched the lower connection. Vernon watched the upper. Eli stood at the orchard meter with Grant. 20 pounds, Eli called. Dry, Ruth answered over the radio. 28, dry. At 34 pounds, one coupling released a bead of water. Vernon tapped the plate with his wrench. The bead stopped. 36, Eli called. The repair held. Wade reopened the east block manifold. Water entered the young trees at 1:14 in the morning. 16 hours after their scheduled cycle began, the old south block remained closed. Grant stood beneath the orchard sign, with his wet jeans rolled and his shoes hanging around his neck. How much did we lose? Water or crop? Wade asked. Both. Too early? Grant nodded. He did not ask again. May drove Eli to the hospital after everyone else threatened to do it. X-rays showed a small fracture beside the dislocated joint. The doctor fitted a sturdier splint and banned heavy work for 4 weeks. Eli laughed. The doctor did not. When they returned before dawn, the wind had died completely. Smoke lay over the valley, but no orange glow showed along the ridge. Captain Vega had texted that Pike Road remained secure, and the crews were holding their line. At the pump house, the motor ran smoothly. The new intake rack stood beneath a fringe of torn leaves. The spillway gate had seated. Delivery pressure remained above the contract minimum. Eli sat on the step, exhausted beyond sleep. May handed him Ray's coffee cup. She had found it in his truck and filled it before they left the house. You pass the review in 3 hours, she said. I'm raising your rent. If I fail, still raising it. You're hard on towels. Headlights appeared at the outer gate, not the cooperative's vehicle. Grant's sedan rolled down the slope and stopped beside them. He emerged wearing fresh clothes and carrying the orchard's water use folder. Wade climbed out from the passenger side. They crossed the mud together. Wade placed the folder beside Eli. "I shut the south block permanently," he said, "for the season anyway. The pears are gone, and the roots are worse than we thought." Grant sat on the pump house step, leaving room between himself and Eli. "We'll release that volume back to the root," he said. Eli looked at him. "You can use it on the east block within your allocation." "We know." "Then why release it?" Grant watched water move through the channel. "Because other people cut for us when the trees needed it." Wade leaned against the wall. His eyes rested on the repaired rack, the new wiring, the clean delivery logs prepared for review. "We thought Dad was the root," he said. "Then we thought the root was junk." Eli waited. Wade looked toward the orchard, invisible through smoke. "We were wrong twice," he said. The cooperative truck arrived at 8 on the dot. Elena Park, the root compliance manager, stepped out carrying a tablet, a pressure gauge, and no visible sympathy for sleepless men. She wore a gray field shirt and a sun hat with one side pinned up. "You look prepared," she told Eli. "He's fractured," May said. "I said prepared. That hand says otherwise." Elena glanced at the splint. "Can you operate every control safely?" "Yes." "Can you do it without lying to impress me?" Eli looked toward May. "She's known me a long time," Elena said. "I come pre-informed. The review took 4 hours." Elena checked the intake rack for stability and photographed the repaired spillway. She made Eli demonstrate the emergency shutoff, then made Wade do it because the contract required a backup operator familiar with the procedure. Wade performed every step correctly. At the pump house, Elena compared meter totals with Eli's logs. She selected dates without warning and asked why pressure changed. He showed her the pump failure, the abandoned T repair, voluntary reductions, emergency standpipe use, and every delayed delivery. "You recorded customer complaints?" she asked. "In the blue section. This many?" "I had customers." May made coffee in the corner. His father recorded complaints in a folder labeled "People being ridiculous." Elena looked at Eli. "I upgraded. They tested pressure at Leonard's farthest meter. The needle settled 1/2 pound above the minimum, exactly where Eli's last test had placed it. Leonard stood nearby with his arms folded, visibly disappointed that nobody needed his assistance. At Mercer Orchard, Elena inspected the closed south block valve and the repaired internal main. Grant supplied water use reports. He did not interrupt Wade. Wade did not blame the emergency filling for the break. The final stop was May's lower pear block. Water entered the repaired riser and moved between rows heavy with surviving fruit. Not a full crop, not enough to erase the trucked water bill from the previous year, but the leaves were green, the soil damp, and the pressure steady. Elena turned off her gauge. "The root remains compliant," she said. Eli waited for something larger to happen. The trees did not applaud. Ray did not step from behind one of them and explain himself. The 6-acre parcel remained rocky. His checking account remained thin, and his broken finger began throbbing in time with his heartbeat. Elena continued. "You'll submit monthly pressure records through the end of the season. Replace the temporary panel repairs before next delivery year. I want a written debris response procedure and a designated second operator. I'll do it." "Good." She held out the tablet. He signed with his left index finger, producing a signature that resembled a fallen ladder. "That's official?" he asked. "It's ugly enough." After she drove away, Wade opened the orchard folder. "I'll stay listed as backup until you find someone permanent. You volunteering?" "I'm avoiding another training." Grant took the folder from him. "Send us the emergency procedure when it's done." Eli looked from one brother to the other. "That all?" Grant frowned. "What do you want? A ribbon?" May cleared her throat. Grant's face loosened. "You did well." Wade nodded. 1/2 pound is showing off. It was not an apology. It was enough for that morning. The Benton Ridge fire stopped growing 2 days later. Captain Vega sent Eli a brief message saying local water access had saved 40 minutes on the first Pike Road response. No structures on the route burned. The orchard did not escape so cleanly. Heat continued through August. Even with deeper cycles, nearly 1/3 of the new apple trees failed to establish. The surviving rows grew unevenly, forcing Wade to abandon the efficient block-wide schedule and water sections according to need. The old South Pear block deteriorated after the main break. Wade removed the fruit, then marked 64 trees for removal. The harvest estimate fell below Grant's retail commitment. The buyer withdrew from the premium launch. Thousands of gold pear boxes sat unused in the packing barn until Grant sold them to a neighboring distributor for less than half their cost. The new labeling line went back to the dealer. The banners came down one by one, leaving cleaner rectangles on the barn siding. Grant handled each loss without drama. That almost made it worse. He built spreadsheets, negotiated extensions, reduced orders, and stopped wearing the Navy logo polo after the third week. The orchard survived because it was worth less than they had promised it would be. Wade replanted nothing that fall. He repaired the south lateral, replaced the oldest filters, and walked every buried main with Eli's pressure map. When they disagreed, they still disagreed loudly, but Wade no longer treated warning as insult. One afternoon, he found Eli measuring the dying pear block. "You were right," Wade said. "About what?" "All of it, apparently." "Pick one." Eli set down the probe. "I wasn't right about the new block. The design uses less water. It would if the trees lived. Some did. Grant says that's the spirit." They walked to the lowest row. Wade placed his palm against the trunk of a tree marked for removal. "I kept thinking I could get to this after the next urgent thing," he said. "Then every urgent thing made this worse. That was Dad's system." "No." Wade looked toward him. "That was mine." The distinction mattered. Eli let it stand. Grant continued the annual buyout payments, even after asking the bank to restructure the orchard's debt. He could have requested a delay. The agreement allowed one under crop loss conditions. He sent the payment on time, with no note. Eli used part of it to replace the pump house feeder cable. Ruth supervised, insulted his conduit bends, and approved the finished panel. He bought a used trenching trailer with the rest. Luis examined the trailer in May's driveway. "You paid how much?" "Less than the seller wanted." "You paid how much?" Eli told him. Luis closed his eyes. "You need a business partner. I have 11 customers and $600 a month from the cooperative. You have 11 customers with broken irrigation and $600 that disappears before breakfast. You offering?" Luis had left Mercer Orchard after harvest. Grant could no longer afford a year-round foreman at his old salary, and Luis had grown tired of managing crews while repairing Ray's neglected equipment at night. There was no anger in the departure. Grant gave him the orchard utility truck at book value and called it the first sensible transaction either of them had made all year. Luis tapped the trenching trailer with one boot. "Half," he said. "I bring the truck, tools, welding gear, and customers who prefer me. Everyone prefers you. That is also an asset." They formed the partnership at May's kitchen table. No lawyer arrived with a clever structure. Ruth downloaded a standard operating agreement, Grant corrected the tax language, and Carla witnessed their signatures because she had come to deliver another jar of excess inventory. Mercer Water Delivery remained the contract name. Their repair work operated under Mercer Ortega Irrigation. Eli wanted Ortega Mercer. Luis refused. "People know Mercer leaks," he said. "Good for business." By the end of the delivery season, they had enough winter repair jobs to keep both of them employed, not rich. Employed. The difference felt solid beneath Eli's feet. May's pear crop sold modestly. Ruth's surviving grapes produced a smaller, unusually concentrated vintage she named Reduced Allocation, which Grant called terrible marketing, and then ordered 2 cases of. Carla paid every invoice and denied enjoying any of them. Leonard's sister took over his farm accounts permanently. Eli moved out of May's spare room after the final September delivery. He rented a small cabin above the river, close enough to hear the pumps, but far enough that imagined alarms no longer brought him out of bed, holding golf balls. May raised his rent for the last month anyway. In October, Grant asked him to come to the orchard house at 6 in the morning. Eli found his brothers at the same kitchen table where Grant had first divided Ray's life into piles. The table had been sanded. The coffee ring was gone, though Eli could still locate its old place by memory. A stack of pruning maps sat in the center. Wade pushed one toward him. "South block comes out. We're restoring half to older pears and leaving the lower section fallow until drainage recovers. No ambrosias?" 12 acres next year," Grant said. "Not 22. Bank decide that?" "We did." Grant slid a 4-page agreement across the table. It hired Mercer Ortega to inspect, maintain, and document the orchard's irrigation system. The rate was fair. The schedule gave Eli access before failures became emergencies. All three brothers had defined responsibilities. Yellow signature flags marked the blanks. Eli looked at Grant. "They're removable," Grant said. Wade laughed into his coffee. "This isn't orchard ownership," Grant added. "I know. We're not reopening the inheritance." "I know." Grant folded his hands. "It's work. Paid work. And it means when we ask what you see, we have to listen to the answer. Contract doesn't say you have to like it. I couldn't get that clause past Wade." Eli read every page. The orchard remained Grant and Wade's. That still hurt in a place he could touch if he wanted to. He also knew what ownership had cost them, and what his own had demanded. None of the papers could make their father fair, or turn 6 silent years into a misunderstanding. He signed. Wade signed as orchard manager. Grant signed as company president. Luis arrived late with breakfast sandwiches and added his name beside Eli's. They walked the system at dawn. Wade led them through the surviving East Block. Grant carried the maps and asked questions without answering them. Luis found a regulator installed backward and claimed this proved the orchard had declined immediately after he left. At the repaired south main, Eli crouched and listened. Water moved cleanly through the pipe. The orchard was running its last frost preparation cycle before winter shut down. Pressure held at the upper rows, crossed the reduced East Block, and continued toward the lower gate. Wade stood beside him. "What do you hear? No leak? Anything else?" Eli looked uphill at the orchard rows, some full, some thinned, some ending in bare ground where their plans had failed. Grant waited with a pencil over the map. Luis ate the last sandwich. Ray's coffee cup rested on the truck hood, still bearing 3 faded pears. "Open the lower valve, another quarter turn," Eli said. Wade did. Water passed through Mercer Orchard and continued downhill toward May's pears, Ruth's vines, Carla's vegetables, and every other place the old route had promised to reach. No one mistook the fruit for the thing keeping it alive.